Rain hammered the glass towers of Manhattan like bullets as another secretary stumbled out of Pisano Global's 60th floor. Mascara streaking her face, career over before lunch. Inside that frozen marble fortress, Cassian Moretti, Sicilian enforcer turned corporate emperor, ran his criminal empire with surgical brutality. One mistake ended careers, two mistakes ended lives. Nobody survived close to him for long. Then a clumsy barista named Elena Whitmore accidentally shattered a priceless Renaissance inkwell within 5 minutes of walking through his door, spilled coffee across ancient marble, and muttered sarcastic commentary under her breath while the entire security team held its breath waiting for blood. Cassian laughed. The office went silent. Because the most dangerous man in New York just became obsessed with the only woman chaotic enough not to fear him, and neither of them would survive what came next. Like this video, comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels, and follow me to the end. The rain came down like the city wanted to drown itself. Elena Whitmore stood outside the glass monolith of Pisano Global, with a to-go cup shaking in her hand and her stomach trying to crawl out through her throat. 60 floors of steel and silence stretched above her, each window reflecting storm clouds that looked like bruises across the sky. She'd walked past this building 1,000 times, serving overpriced lattes to hedge fund sociopaths, never imagining she'd actually be stupid enough to walk inside. But her landlord didn't take art history degrees as rent payment. Neither did the hospital holding her mother's medical bills hostage. So here she was, 26 years old, wearing a thrift store blazer that didn't quite fit, holding a coffee she couldn't afford, about to interview for a job she definitely wouldn't get. The lobby swallowed her whole. Marble floors stretched in every direction like frozen lakes. Everything gleamed, chrome fixtures, polished stone, security guards in suits that cost more than her entire wardrobe. Elena's sneakers squeaked against the floor. Every head turned. She felt like a stray dog wandering into a cathedral. "Can I help you?" The receptionist's voice could have cut glass. "I have an interview." Elena's voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Executive assistant position, 10 o'clock. The woman's expression flickered, something between pity and disbelief. "60th floor, elevator bank C. Don't be late." Elena nodded and walked toward the elevators before her legs could mutiny. Behind her, she heard whispered conversation, the receptionist's voice dropping low. "Another one. She won't last an hour." The elevator ride felt like ascending into hell in reverse. Numbers climbed. Her reflection stared back from polished steel. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled into a bun that was already losing structural integrity. Coffee stain on her sleeve she'd tried to hide under the blazer. She looked exactly like what she was, desperate and out of her depth. The doors opened on 60. Silence hit her like a physical thing. No phones ringing, no chatter, just the hushed whisper of expensive ventilation and the soft click of keyboards from people who looked like they'd been carved from ice. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Manhattan sprawled below, rain turning the city into a watercolor bleeding across glass. "You're the 10 o'clock." Not a question. The man who spoke wore a suit that probably cost 5 figures and an expression that suggested he'd watched people fail at this job so many times it didn't even register anymore. "Follow me. Don't touch anything." Elena followed him through corridors lined with art that belonged in museums. Renaissance paintings, ancient sculptures, a Ming vase sitting on a pedestal like it wasn't worth more than her entire life. Every piece positioned with mathematical precision, lit by soft halogens that made the marble glow. The man stopped outside massive double doors. "He's in a conference call. You'll wait here. When he's ready, I'll take you in. Keep your hands to yourself and speak only when spoken to." Then he was gone. Elena stood there clutching her coffee, trying to remember how to breathe. Through the doors she could hear a voice, low, controlled, speaking rapid Italian that sounded like gravel wrapped in silk. She couldn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. That was the voice of a man who'd never been told no in his life and wouldn't recognize the concept if it bit him. The door opened without warning. The man, the one she'd heard in other interviews called Ice in a Suit, gestured her forward. "Now." Elena walked into Cassian Moretti's office and immediately understood why grown men were afraid of him. The space was enormous. 40 feet of marble and glass, furnished with pieces that looked like they'd been stolen from palaces. Rain hammered against floor-to-ceiling windows behind a desk the size of a small car. And sitting behind that desk, perfectly still, was the kind of man who made you understand exactly how small and fragile you were just by existing in the same room. Cassian Moretti was maybe 35, built like violence wrapped in a three-piece suit that probably cost more than a decent car. Dark hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved by someone who understood cruelty. Sharp jaw, straight nose, eyes the color of frozen seawater. He radiated control like other people radiated body heat, every movement precise, every breath calculated. He was looking at her the way scientists look at bacteria under microscopes. Sit. One word, not a suggestion. Elena sat in the leather chair facing his desk and tried not to shake. She set her coffee cup on the armrest, fingers still wrapped around it like a security blanket. Cassian's eyes tracked the movement, registered the coffee, said nothing. Elena Whitmore. He spoke her name like he was reading a medical report. No inflection. Art history degree from NYU. 3 years working in coffee shops. Previous employment includes gallery internships that paid nothing and led nowhere. Currently $26,000 in medical debt due to your mother's cancer treatment. Rent 3 months overdue. He glanced up. You walked here in the rain because you can't afford subway fare. Elena's throat closed. Every personal detail of her life laid out like he was gutting a fish. No warmth, no judgment, just facts presented with surgical precision. The previous 5 assistants quit within a week. Cassian leaned back in his chair. The 3 before that were terminated. I require perfection. I do not accept excuses, delays, or incompetence. You will work 16-hour days. You will not question my decisions. You will anticipate my needs before I express them. He tilted his head slightly. Why are you wasting my time? The question hit like a slap. Elena felt something crack open inside her chest. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was 3 months of rejection letters and landlord threats, and watching her mother fade in a hospital bed she couldn't pay for. Maybe it was just the absolute certainty that she had nothing left to lose. Because I'm smarter than every polished Ivy League robot you've already fired. The words came out before she could stop them. You don't need someone who knows how to format emails and schedule conference calls. You need someone who can see patterns nobody else sees. And I can do that. Silence dropped like a guillotine. Cassian didn't move, didn't blink. Just stared at her with those glacier eyes like he was deciding whether she was interesting or just stupid. Prove it. He slid a document across the desk. Elena leaned forward, picked it up. Contract terms. Dense legal language about international consulting services, payment schedules, corporate entities she didn't recognize. Her art history background made her good at one thing, finding details other people missed. She scanned the text, looking for the thing that didn't fit. 15 seconds later, she found it. Clause 17. She tapped the page. The delivery schedule references standard maritime protocols, but the container codes don't match any legitimate shipping format. They're using Renaissance merchant symbols, specifically Venetian trade guild markers from the 15th century. She looked up. Someone's hiding cargo classifications inside historical references that modern customs systems won't flag. The room went absolutely still. Cassian's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Interest. Or maybe danger. With a man like him, the two were probably the same thing. Where did you learn Venetian trade symbols? Thesis research on Renaissance merchant networks and the origins of modern banking systems. Spent 8 months in archives reading original ledgers. Elena's hands were shaking, but her voice held steady. Most people think art history is memorizing pretty paintings. It's actually code-breaking for dead economies. Cassian stood. The movement was liquid, controlled. He walked around the desk, came to stand directly in front of her. This close, Elena could see the absolute precision of everything. The razor edge of his collar, the perfect symmetry of his cufflinks, the way his suit didn't have a single wrinkle despite the rain. He smelled like expensive cologne and something darker. Old leather, gun oil. You just identified a classified element of a contract most attorneys missed entirely. His voice dropped lower. That makes you either extremely valuable or extremely dangerous. Elena's heart hammered. Which one gets me the job? For exactly 3 seconds, Cassian Moretti stared at her like he was looking at an equation that didn't balance. Then he almost smiled. Not quite. Just the ghost of something human flickering across that carved stone face before disappearing again. You're hired. Starting salary $75,000. Medical benefits begin immediately. Enough to cover your mother's treatment. You'll work directly under my supervision. No intermediaries. He turned back toward his desk. There's an NDA and confidentiality agreement that requires signing. Read it carefully. Once you sign, you belong to this organization. Completely. Elena stood on shaking legs. $75,000. Medical coverage. The answer to 3 months of nightmares delivered in one emotionless sentence. I'll sign. I know you will. Cassian picked up a pen, actual fountain pen, probably worth more than her rent, and held it out. People always do. Elena took the pen. Her fingers brushed his for half a second. His hand was warm. Somehow that felt more disturbing than if he'd been cold as marble. She signed her name at the bottom of the contract without reading the fine print. Survival instinct had died somewhere around week 8 of unemployment. You start now. Cassian pressed a button on his desk. The man in the expensive suit appeared in the doorway like he'd been waiting. Marco will give you office access, security clearance, and your workstation. You have 30 minutes to familiarize yourself with my schedule. I have a meeting at 11. You'll attend and take notes. Yes, sir. Elena turned to follow Marco out, made it exactly 3 steps before her elbow caught the edge of a side table. The coffee cup she'd forgotten she was still holding flew out of her hand. Everything happened in slow motion. The cup arced through the air. Coffee exploded outward in a perfect brown spiral. And sitting on that side table, positioned on a bed of dark velvet like something sacred, was an antique inkwell made of blown glass and gold filigree. Renaissance era. Probably Florentine. Absolutely priceless. The coffee cup hit it dead center. Glass shattered. Gold cracked. Pieces flew across the marble floor like shrapnel. Brown liquid spread across white stone, carrying fragments of broken art with it. The entire room froze. Marco went white. Security guards appeared in the doorway, hands moving toward weapons under their jackets. Elena stood there, coffee dripping from her fingers, staring at 1,000 pieces of irreplaceable history scattered across the floor. Her brain short-circuited. Oh, shit. She dropped to her knees and started trying to pick up glass with her bare hands. Panic made her movements jerky. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can fix this. I can find someone who does restoration. There are specialists in Brooklyn who work with Renaissance glass. I know someone who... Stop talking. Cassian's voice cut through her rambling like a knife. Elena froze. Glass pieces still in her hands, coffee soaking into her sleeve, certain she was about to die. Footsteps. Cassian walked toward her, stood looking down at the destruction. His face was absolutely unreadable. That inkwell belonged to my brother. His voice had no emotion in it at all. He died 6 years ago. It was the only thing of his I kept. Elena's throat closed completely. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, just knelt there in broken glass and coffee, waiting for whatever came next. Then Cassian did something that made the entire security team go rigid with shock. He laughed. Not a big laugh, just a short, sharp sound like something breaking loose inside his chest. He looked at her. Really looked at her. Kneeling in wreckage and panic with glass in her hands and coffee in her hair, and something cracked in that frozen face. 5 minutes. He shook his head slowly. You lasted 5 minutes before destroying something irreplaceable. I can pay for it. Elena knew it was stupid even as she said it. I'll work for free. You'll stand up and stop touching broken glass before you bleed on my floor. Cassian's voice went back to that controlled monotone. Marco, get maintenance to clean this. Have security review the surveillance footage. I want to know exactly how this happened. Elena stood. Her knees were shaking so badly she almost fell. I'm fired. No. Cassian walked back to his desk like nothing had happened. You're exactly what I expected. Chaotic, brilliant, completely incapable of following simple instructions like, don't touch anything. He sat down, picked up a different pen. Now go familiarize yourself with my schedule. You have 28 minutes. Elena stared at him. You're not firing me. I just spent 5 minutes watching you try to rebuild a priceless artifact with your bare hands while apologizing to broken glass. Most people would have run. He glanced up. You stayed. That interests me. Marco appeared at her elbow, gently steering her toward the door. Elena let herself be guided out, brain still trying to process what just happened. Behind her, she heard Cassian's voice, quiet. And Elena. She turned. He was watching her with those ice water eyes. Don't make me regret this. Gaek. Her workstation turned out to be a glass desk in a small office directly outside Cassian's door. Close enough that she could hear him on phone calls. Close enough that he could appear in her doorway without warning. The computer had 17 monitors. The phone system looked like it required an engineering degree. Post-it notes covered every surface. Reminders from the previous assistant about Cassian's schedule, his preferences, his absolute rules about coffee temperature and meeting start times and which calls to interrupt him for and which ones meant death. Elena sat down and stared at the chaos. You'll want to quit by tomorrow. The voice came from behind her. She turned to find a woman in her 40s, perfectly composed, holding a tablet like a shield. I'm Grace. I run executive operations, which means I clean up after him when assistants inevitably fail. Nice to meet you. No, it isn't. Grace's smile was sharp. You seem like a nice girl, so I'll be direct. Cassian Moretti is impossible. He doesn't sleep. He doesn't make mistakes. He expects you to be psychic and perfect and available at all hours. The last assistant had a nervous breakdown in the bathroom. The one before that quit via text message at 3 a.m. You won't be different. Noted. Grace studied her. You're either very brave or very stupid. Broke. Elena turned back to the monitors. That's a third option nobody considers. Fair enough. Grace set a thick binder on the desk. His schedule. Memorize it. He'll quiz you randomly and expects instant answers. Coffee is consumed at 8:15, noon, and 4:30. Never early, never late. Temperature between 160 and 165 degrees. Anything else gets thrown out. She paused. I heard you destroyed his brother's inkwell. Yeah. And you're still alive. Apparently. Grace was quiet for a moment. That's unusual. Cassian doesn't forgive mistakes, especially not ones involving his brother. Elena looked up. What happened to him? The brother. That's not something you ask about. Grace's voice went flat. Not if you want to keep working here. Some subjects are forbidden. That's one of them. She left without another word. Elena spent the next 20 minutes trying to decode Cassian's schedule. Meetings stacked back-to-back from dawn until midnight. Conference calls with Tokyo at 4 a.m. Dinners with people whose names she recognized from financial news. Everything color-coded, cross-referenced, annotated with notes about preferences and security protocols and which restaurants required armed escorts. Her phone buzzed. New email. From Cassian. Subject, 11 a.m. meeting. Body, conference room A. Bring your tablet. Don't be late. Elena grabbed the tablet Grace had left, stood up too fast, knocked over a cup of pens, scrambled to catch them, and nearly tripped over her own feet getting to the door. This was going to be a disaster. Look. Conference room A looked like where world leaders negotiated wars. 20 feet of polished marble table. Leather chairs that probably cost more than cars. Windows overlooking Manhattan spread out like a kingdom. 6 men in suits worth mortgage payments sat around the table looking at her like she was something tracked in on someone's shoe. Cassian sat at the head. Perfect posture. Hands folded on the table. Completely still except for his eyes, which tracked her entrance with predatory focus. You're 45 seconds late. Elena's stomach dropped. The elevator. I don't accept excuses. He gestured to an empty chair. Sit. Take notes. Do not speak unless I ask a direct question. She sat, opened the tablet, tried to look professional while her hands shook. The meeting started without preamble. Shipping routes, container manifests, port schedules across 3 continents. The men talked in abbreviations and code. Nothing that sounded illegal, but everything that felt wrong. Like watching someone speak perfect English while knowing they're lying in a language you can't prove. Elena typed everything, focused on the patterns. Then someone said, "The Venice shipment cleared customs using the standard protocols." Elena's hands stopped. Venice, standard protocols. The same phrase she'd seen in the contract, the one using Renaissance trade symbols to hide cargo classifications. She glanced up, found Cassian watching her. His expression gave away nothing, but she felt the weight of his attention like physical pressure. One of the men, older, gray-haired, with the kind of face that had seen violence up close, leaned forward. Our contact in the customs office confirmed the routing. No flags, no questions. Good. Cassian's voice stayed level. Continue using the established channels. I want weekly reports. The meeting continued. Elena kept typing, but something was crawling up her spine. The careful language, the deliberate vagueness, the way everyone in this room looked like they'd buried bodies and slept fine afterward. This wasn't a consulting firm. This was something else entirely. An hour later, the meeting ended. The men filed out. Elena stayed seated, staring at her notes, trying to make sense of what she'd just witnessed. Close the door. She looked up. Everyone was gone. Just Cassian, still sitting at the head of the table, watching her with those frozen eyes. Elena stood, closed the door, turned back. You recognized the reference. Not a question. The Venice protocols, same code structure from the contract. Cassian stood slowly, walked around the table toward her, each step deliberate. You understand what that means. It means you're not running a consulting firm. Elena's voice came out steadier than she felt. You're moving something through international shipping channels using historical symbols to bypass modern customs systems. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the exact shade of his eyes, pale gray with darker rings around the iris, close enough to run if she needed to. And now that you know that, Cassian said quietly, what do you plan to do? The question hung in the air like a blade. Elena's brain screamed at her to lie, to play dumb, to pretend she hadn't noticed anything wrong. But she'd spent 6 years studying Renaissance merchant networks. She knew exactly what those symbols meant, and she knew that lying to a man like Cassian Moretti was probably more dangerous than telling the truth. I plan to keep my mouth shut and do my job. She met his eyes. Because whatever you're moving through those channels, it's keeping this company running. And this company is paying for my mother's cancer treatment. Silence stretched. Cassian tilted his head slightly. You're not afraid. I'm terrified. Elena's hands were shaking again. But I'm more afraid of losing this job than I am of you. Something flickered across his face, almost respect, almost amusement. That's honest. You hired me because I'm smart enough to notice things other people miss. Elena's heart hammered. That includes knowing when to notice things and when to pretend I didn't. Cassian studied her for a long moment. Then he walked back to the table, gathered his papers with precise movements. You'll sign an additional NDA. Extremely specific terms about confidentiality and the consequences of violating it. He glanced at her. Those consequences are not metaphorical. Understood. Good. He headed for the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. The inkwell you destroyed. My brother gave it to me the day before he died. He believed our family could become legitimate, walk away from the violence. His voice went flat. He was wrong. Then he was gone. Elena stood alone in the conference room, surrounded by luxury and rain and the growing certainty that she'd just signed her life over to something far more dangerous than a demanding boss. Outside the windows, Manhattan sprawled in the storm. Somewhere down there, normal people were living normal lives, going to normal jobs, facing normal problems. Elena wasn't one of them anymore. The next 3 weeks became a study in controlled chaos. Elena learned Cassian's rhythms the way musicians learn Bach, complex, precise, no room for improvisation. Coffee at 8:15, 163 degrees, in the specific mug kept in the cabinet behind his desk. Meetings started exactly on time, never a second early or late. Phone calls screened according to an elaborate hierarchy only she could decode. Schedules adjusted in real time based on information she had to anticipate before he asked. She was exhausted, constantly behind, always scrambling, and somehow, against all logic, she was good at it. The pattern recognition that made her good at art history translated perfectly to corporate espionage masquerading as executive assistants. She started seeing connections before they materialized. guest lists that suggested allegiances, meeting times that revealed priorities. The way Cassian's jaw tightened when certain names appeared on his screen, tiny tells that taught her who mattered and who didn't. But the real revelation came late one night in the third week. Elena was alone in her office at 11 p.m., surrounded by file boxes Grace had dumped on her desk, with instructions to organize shipment manifests. Routine archival work. Boring. Except the manifests weren't boring at all. They were Renaissance trade ledgers disguised as modern business documents. Elena spread them across her desk, cross-referencing dates and container codes and port schedules. The pattern emerged slowly, then all at once. Someone was running a secondary network. Hidden inside Cassian's legitimate operations, someone had built a parallel trafficking system using the same Renaissance symbols but with subtle variations. Different merchants, different guild markers, a ghost network piggybacking on the real one. And the codes dated back years, long before Elena started working here. She sat back, heart pounding. This wasn't just corporate espionage. This was betrayal from inside the organization. Someone close enough to Cassian to access his systems, close enough to hide in plain sight. The office door opened. Elena jumped. Paper scattered. Cassian stood in the doorway, still wearing his suit despite the hour, looking at her and the chaos of documents spread across her desk. "It's 11:30. His voice was calm. "You should have left hours ago." "I was organizing the archives." Elena's throat was dry. "Found some inconsistencies in the shipping manifest." He went very still. "What kind of inconsistencies?" "Someone's using your routing systems to move their own cargo. The codes are similar enough to pass casual inspection, but different enough that they're running a separate network." She pointed to two manifests side by side. "This one uses authentic Venetian merchant marks. This one uses modified symbols from a competing guild. Same routes, different cargo." Cassian walked to her desk, looked down at the documents. His face gave away nothing, but Elena saw his hands, the way his fingers tightened almost imperceptibly. "How long has this been happening?" "At least 3 years based on the oldest documents in the archive." "Can you identify who's running it?" Elena pulled out another sheet. "The authorization codes trace back to someone with executive-level access. Someone who can approve shipments without your direct oversight." She looked up. "How many people have that kind of clearance?" "4. Cassian's voice had gone very quiet. "Myself, Marco, Grace, and Luca DeMarco, head of security." The name landed like a stone in water. Elena had met Luca once, briefly. A man in his 40s with military posture and eyes that looked like they'd seen the worst things humans could do to each other. He ran Cassian's security operations with the same cold precision Cassian ran everything else. "It could be any of them," Elena said carefully. "No." Cassian picked up one of the manifests. "Marco has been with me since we were children. Grace handles operations but has no interest in the shipping networks. That leaves Luca." His jaw tightened. "My father's oldest friend, the man who taught me how to survive in this world." "I could be wrong." "You're not." Cassian set the paper down with controlled precision. "Your instinct was right the day you walked in here. You see patterns no one else sees." He looked at her. "That makes you either extremely valuable or extremely dangerous. We both know which one you are now." Elena's pulse hammered. "What are you going to do?" "Confirm it, quietly." He moved toward the door, stopped. "Elena." "Yes?" "Tell no one about this. Not Grace, not Marco, no one." His eyes held hers. "If Luca discovers you know, he'll kill you. Not metaphorically, literally." Then he was gone. Elena sat alone in her office, surrounded by evidence of betrayal, and understood with perfect clarity that she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She wasn't just an assistant anymore. She was a liability. And in Cassian Moretti's world, liabilities didn't survive long. Elena didn't sleep that night. She lay in her cramped studio apartment, staring at water stains on the ceiling while her brain replayed every conversation she'd had with Luca DeMarco. The polite nods in hallways, the way he'd held doors open with military precision. That brief moment in the elevator when he'd asked how she was settling in, voice warm, smile reaching his eyes. All of it felt different now, contaminated. By 4 a.m., she gave up pretending. Made coffee she couldn't taste. watched dawn break over the city like a wound opening across the sky. Her phone buzzed at 6:30. Text from Cassian. Office. 7 a.m. Don't be late. Elena arrived at 6:50 wearing yesterday's clothes and enough concealer to hide the fact that she looked like death. The 60th floor was already alive with activity. People moving through corridors with the focused intensity of soldiers preparing for battle. Something had shifted overnight. She could feel it in the air like electricity before a storm. Cassian's office door was open. He stood at the windows with his back to the room, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Italian. His jacket was off, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked like he hadn't slept either. Elena waited in the doorway until he ended the call. Come in, close the door. She obeyed. Stood in the center of the office while he turned to face her. His eyes were bloodshot, jaw tight with exhaustion or rage or both. I spent the night reviewing 3 years of shipping records. His voice was flat. You were right. Luca's been running a parallel network using my infrastructure, weapons, pharmaceuticals, materials that would trigger immediate federal investigation if discovered. He walked to his desk, pulled out a slim folder. These are the original manifests, the real ones, before he altered them in the system. Elena took the folder, opened it. Her stomach turned. The cargo descriptions were explicit. Military-grade weapons moving through civilian ports. Controlled substances hidden in legitimate pharmaceutical shipments. Everything designed to slip past customs inspection using the same Renaissance coding system she'd identified. How did you get these? Luca keeps paper backups. Old habit from my father's era. Cassian's expression was carved from ice. He stores them in a secure facility in Brooklyn. I accessed it last night. You broke into his storage facility. I own the building. Something dangerous flickered across his face. He just didn't know it. Elena set the folder down carefully. What are you going to do? That depends on what you do next. Cassian leaned against his desk. I need someone I can trust to track his movements without triggering suspicion. Someone invisible. Someone he won't see as a threat. The implication landed like a stone in her chest. You want me to spy on him. I want you to do your job. Schedule meetings, organize files, be the clumsy assistant everyone expects you to be. His eyes held hers. And report everything you notice about Luca's schedule, his contacts, his behavioral patterns. He'll know. He won't. You're a 26-year-old art history graduate who destroys priceless artifacts and spills coffee on keyboards. He thinks you're harmless. Cassian's voice went quieter. That's your advantage. Elena's hands were shaking. And if he finds out I'm watching him, then I'll make sure your body is never found. He said it without inflection. Statement of fact. Because if Luca discovers I know about his operation, he won't just kill you. He'll dismantle everything I've built and bury me in the wreckage. You understanding that keeps us both alive. The room felt smaller, colder. Why me? Elena's voice came out rough. You have trained security, professional investigators, people who actually know what they're doing. Because everyone loyal to me is also loyal to him. He recruited half my security team, trained them personally. Cassian straightened. You're the only person in this building who doesn't owe him anything, the only variable he hasn't controlled. That doesn't make me qualified. No, it makes you necessary. He walked toward her, stopped close enough that she had to tilt her head to meet his eyes. I'm not asking you to be James Bond. I'm asking you to notice things. You're already good at that. The rest is just survival. Elena's pulse hammered. Every instinct screamed at her to run, quit, disappear before this turned into the kind of violence she'd spent her whole life avoiding. But $75,000. Medical benefits. Her mother's treatment continuing without interruption. What do I get if I do this? Cassian's expression shifted. Almost approval. $100,000 bonus when this is over. And the certainty that you're on the winning side when things get ugly. When, not if. There is no if. His voice was absolutely certain. Luca's been planning something for years, building resources, establishing networks. Men like him don't run parallel operations for fun. They do it because they're preparing to take over. He paused. I need to know when he's ready to move. You're going to tell me. Elena looked at the folder on the desk. at the evidence of betrayal stretching back years, at the man standing in front of her offering her money and protection in exchange for becoming the kind of person she'd never imagined being. Okay, the word came out barely louder than breathing. I'll do it. Good. Cassian walked back to the windows. Luca has a meeting scheduled at 10 a.m. Conference room B. You'll sit in and take notes. Pay attention to everything. Who he talks to, what he says, the way he says it. He'll wonder why I'm there. You're my assistant. You attend all executive meetings now. He glanced back. Get used to being underestimated. It's the only weapon you have. Itsun. Conference room B was smaller than A. More intimate. 6 chairs instead of 20. The kind of space where power was negotiated behind closed doors. Elena arrived early carrying her tablet and a coffee she didn't want, sat in the corner chair, made herself invisible. Luca walked in at exactly 10 a.m. He looked the same as always, military posture, gray suit, eyes that had seen combat and come out colder for it. But now Elena saw different details. The way his gaze swept the room, checking exits. The slight bulge under his left shoulder where a weapon sat. The absolute control in every movement. Elena. His voice was warm, friendly. I didn't know you'd be joining us. Mr. Moretti asked me to take notes for all executive meetings now. Of course. Luca smiled. It looked genuine. How are you settling in? I heard about the incident with the inkwell. Heat crawled up Elena's neck. Still settling. Don't worry, Cassian's standards are impossible. We all fail eventually. He took a seat at the head of the table. The key is failing in ways he finds useful. 2 other men entered, both in expensive suits. Both carrying themselves like violence was a second language they spoke fluently. Elena recognized one from previous meetings, Marco's second in command. The other was new, younger, military tattoos visible on his wrists. Luca didn't bother with introductions, just started talking. The Brooklyn warehouse is ready. Final shipment arrives next week. Everything routes through the standard channels. Nothing that triggers attention. He glanced at a document. Customs contacts have been compensated. No inspection flags. The younger man spoke. What about Moretti's oversight? Handled. Luca's voice stayed level. He's focused on the Singapore expansion. Won't notice secondary operations until it's too late. Elena kept typing. Her hands wanted to shake, but she forced them steady. Kept her face neutral. Just an assistant taking notes on things she didn't understand. Timeline? Marco's second asked. 4 weeks, maybe less if the federal investigation shifts focus. Luca leaned back. We move when Cassian's out of the country. Minimal resistance. Clean transition. Transition. The word hung in the air like a threat. Elena's stomach turned. They weren't just running a parallel network. They were planning a coup. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes. Logistics, personnel, financial transfers that would happen too fast for anyone to stop. All of it discussed with the casual efficiency of men planning a hostile takeover. When it ended, Luca stood, smiled at Elena. Thank you for your time. I'm sure those notes will be very useful. She nodded, didn't trust her voice. Watched him leave with the same controlled grace he'd entered with. The door closed. Elena sat alone in the conference room staring at her tablet, at the evidence of betrayal spelled out in meeting minutes and polite corporate language. 4 weeks, maybe less. She stood on shaking legs and walked straight to Cassian's office. He was on a conference call when she entered, held up one finger, finished the conversation in clipped sentences before hanging up. Well? Elena set her tablet on his desk. They're planning to move in 4 weeks while you're out of the country. Luca called it a clean transition. He has customs contacts bribed. A warehouse in Brooklyn ready. Personnel in place. Cassian's expression didn't change, but something happened behind his eyes. Ice turning to steel. Did he mention specifics about the warehouse location? No, just Brooklyn. Elena's hands were shaking again. He knows you're focused on Singapore. He's counting on you being distracted. Of course he is. Cassian stood, walked to the windows. Rain had started again, turning the city into a gray blur. My father used the same strategy when he took over the Moretti operations from his predecessor. Wait for distraction, strike fast, leave no room for counterattack. His voice went flat. Luca taught him that technique. You can stop him. You know the timeline now. Knowing when doesn't tell me how. He turned to face her. Luca's been building this for years. He has resources I don't know about, contacts I can't trace. Moving against him without complete information would trigger exactly what he's planning. Cassian's jaw tightened. I need more than a timeline. I need his entire network mapped. Every person, every connection, every weakness. That's impossible in 4 weeks. Yes. He looked at her. Unless you can accelerate the process. Elena's throat closed. How? Luca keeps files. Physical records he doesn't trust to digital systems. Old habits from working with my father. Cassian walked toward her. Those files contain everything. Names, bank accounts, the full scope of his operation. Where does he keep them? His personal office, 20th floor. Secure access. Armed guards outside 24/7. He stopped directly in front of her. But he leaves for a security briefing every Thursday at 6 p.m., 45 minutes. That's your window. Elena's brain short-circuited. You want me to break into his office? I want you to access files he's left vulnerable. There's a difference. There really isn't. Cassian's expression shifted, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. You said you'd do this. Help me identify his network. This is how you do that. I said I'd take notes, not commit corporate espionage. You committed the moment you identified his parallel shipping network. His voice stayed quiet. There's no neutral ground here. You're either with me or you're a liability, and I don't keep liabilities. The threat wasn't even veiled, just sitting there between them like a loaded gun on a table. Elena wanted to scream, to tell him to go to hell, to walk out and never come back. But her mother was in Mount Sinai getting experimental treatment that cost $30,000 a month. Treatment that was working, shrinking the tumors, buying time. How do I get past security? Something flickered in Cassian's eyes. Respect or satisfaction or both. You don't. You walk past them carrying file boxes. Tell them you're reorganizing archives for me. They'll let you through because you're harmless. Just a clumsy assistant doing grunt work. And the cameras? I'll handle those. 20-minute loop starting at 6:15. Enough time to get in, photograph what you need. Get out! He pulled a slim device from his desk drawer. This is a document scanner. Point and shoot. Stores everything encrypted. Bring it back to me when you're done. Elena took the scanner. It felt heavier than it should, like holding evidence of a crime she hadn't committed yet. What if he comes back early? Then you die. Cassian said it without emotion. So don't let him come back early. Thursday arrived faster than Elena wanted. She spent 3 days memorizing Luca's schedule down to the minute, practiced carrying file boxes until her arms stopped shaking, rehearsed her cover story until it sounded natural instead of terrified. At 5:45 p.m., she stood outside the 20th floor with 2 empty file boxes and a scanner hidden in her jacket pocket. The guards outside Luca's office were exactly what Cassian promised. Military contractors who looked like they ate bullets for breakfast. Both armed. Both watching her with the detached interest of men who'd seen people try stupid things before. Elena walked up carrying the boxes. Smiled. Hi, Mr. Moretti asked me to reorganize some archive files. Apparently Mr. DeMarco has originals that need scanning? The taller guard frowned. Nobody told us about this. Nobody tells me anything either. Elena shifted the boxes. I just do what I'm told. You want to call up to 60 and confirm? I can wait. The guards exchanged looks. The shorter one shrugged. Make it quick. He's back in 45 minutes. Thank you. The door unlocked with a soft click. Elena stepped into Luca DeMarco's private office and immediately understood why he'd never trusted digital systems. The space looked like a war room. Maps covered one wall. Shipping routes marked in red, port cities circled, military installations highlighted. Filing cabinets lined another wall. Everything labeled in handwritten Italian. A desk held 3 monitors, all dark. And sitting on a side table, locked inside a glass case, was a handgun that looked older than she was. Her pulse hammered so loud she could hear it. 6:15. Camera loop activated. Elena pulled out the scanner, started with the filing cabinets. Personnel files. Bank records. Communications logs dating back 6 years. Everything cross-referenced with the kind of meticulous attention that came from decades of intelligence work. She photographed pages as fast as the scanner would process them, hands shaking, sweat running down her spine. Drawer after drawer, hundreds of documents, names she recognized from meetings, accounts in countries that didn't ask questions, timelines that showed Luca building his network piece by piece while Cassian's father was still alive. This wasn't just a coup. This was a hostile takeover that had been in motion for years. Elena was halfway through the third cabinet when she found the folder marked Moretti, confidential. Inside were photographs. Cassian as a child, maybe 8 years old, standing next to a teenage boy who looked like an older version of him. Same jaw, same eyes, both smiling at something off camera. The brother, the one who died 6 years ago. Elena flipped through more photos. The brothers growing up, training together, the older one always slightly in front, like he was leading the way. Then newspaper clippings, articles about a car accident in the Catskills. Vehicle went off a mountain road. Driver killed instantly, except the articles were marked up. Notes in Luca's handwriting, brake line severed, steering column compromised, witnesses paid off. The accident wasn't an accident. Elena's hand stopped working. Luca had killed Cassian's brother, made it look like a crash, covered it up so perfectly that nobody questioned it. And Cassian had spent 6 years believing it was just bad luck and dangerous roads. She photographed everything. The notes, the evidence, the proof of murder hidden in plain sight. Her watch read 6:42, 3 minutes over schedule. Elena shoved the folder back, closed the cabinet, grabbed the scanner and the empty boxes and headed for the door. Voices in the hallway. She froze. Told you it would be handled. The timeline hasn't changed. Luca's voice, coming closer. He was early. Elena's brain went into overdrive. The guards would tell him someone was in his office. He'd know immediately. There was no exit except through the door he was about to walk through. She looked around desperately. The monitors. The desk. She dropped to the floor, crawled under the desk, pulled the chair in tight, and made herself as small as possible in the space where his legs would go. The door opened. Footsteps. Luca walked in talking on his phone. No, move the shipment up. I want everything in place by next week. He sat down. The chair rolled forward. His legs were inches from Elena's face. She could see his shoes, custom leather, probably Italian. Could smell his cologne mixed with gun oil and something else. Copper, like old blood. Elena held her breath. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just stayed frozen in the dark space under the desk while Luca DeMarco, the man who'd murdered Cassian's brother, who was planning a coup, who would kill her without hesitation if he knew she was there, sat 2 feet away finishing his phone call. Good. Confirm with the Brooklyn team. I want verification by morning. He ended the call, started typing. Elena's lungs screamed. Black spots danced across her vision. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. If she gasped for air, he'd hear it. If she shifted position, he'd feel it. More typing, a drawer opening, papers rustling. Then Luca's phone rang again. DeMarco. He answered immediately. What? When? His voice changed, went hard. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Lock it down. Nobody touches anything until I arrive. He stood, chair rolled back. Elena saw his legs move toward the door, heard it open, close. Silence. She waited 30 seconds, crawled out from under the desk on shaking limbs, stood on legs that barely held her weight. The scanner was still in her jacket, the boxes still where she'd dropped them. She grabbed everything and walked out on pure adrenaline. The guards looked up. All done? Yep. Her voice sounded almost normal. Thanks. She made it to the elevator, pressed the button for 60, watched the numbers climb while her entire body shook. The doors opened. Cassian stood waiting, took one look at her face and knew. Conference room, now. But she followed him into the private conference room attached to his office. The door closed, locked. What happened? His voice was controlled, but his eyes were intense. Elena pulled out the scanner, set it on the table. I got everything. Personnel files, bank records, communications logs. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the device. And proof that Luca killed your brother. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Cassian went absolutely still. What? Photographs. Newspaper clippings about the accident. Notes in Luca's handwriting showing it wasn't an accident. Elena's voice cracked. He sabotaged the car, paid off witnesses, made it look like a crash. Cassian took the scanner. His hands were steady, but something was happening behind his eyes. Something cold and lethal rising to the surface. Show me. Elena pulled up the photos on her phone, held it out. Cassian looked at the screen. At the evidence of his brother's murder. At 6 years of lies condensed into handwritten notes and careful documentation. His expression didn't change, but his breathing did. Shallow, controlled, like he was physically holding himself together. He killed Marco. Cassian's voice was barely audible. My brother. The only person who ever believed we could be something other than criminals. He set the phone down with mechanical precision, and I've spent 6 years trusting the man who murdered him. Cassian, leave. The word came out flat, dead. I'm not leaving you alone right now. Elena. He looked at her. His eyes were empty, hollowed out. Leave. Before I do something I can't take back. She stood her ground. You asked me to help you. I'm helping. You've helped enough. His voice was rising, not loud, but intense. You've given me everything I need to burn his entire operation to the ground. Now get out before you get caught in the fire. No. The refusal hung between them. Cassian stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Really seeing her. Not as an assistant, not as a useful tool. As a person making an impossible choice to stay when every survival instinct screamed to run. Why? His voice cracked. Why would you stay? Because you're not going to burn anything to the ground. Elena's hands were still shaking, but her voice held steady. You're going to take 24 hours. Process this. Make a plan that doesn't end with you in prison or dead. She moved closer. Your brother wanted you to be better than the violence. Remember? You told me that. My brother's dead because I wasn't violent enough. Cassian's control was fracturing. She could see it in the way his hands clenched, the tension in his jaw. I should have seen it. Should have known Luca was lying. Should have... You were grieving. He manipulated that. Elena cut him off. Taking Luca down when you're emotional makes you sloppy. You're not sloppy. You're precise. So be precise. Cassian looked at her for a long moment. Rain hammered the windows. The city sprawled below like a wound. Then something shifted in his expression. The ice cracked, just a fraction. I don't know how to not be angry. Then be angry, but be smart about it. Elena held his gaze. Use what I found, map his network. Identify every person loyal to him, then dismantle it piece by piece until there's nothing left. That takes time. He moves in 4 weeks. Then we move faster. She pulled up the scanner files on the conference room monitor. These documents show everything: bank accounts, communication channels, personnel assignments. We have his entire operation mapped out. We just have to use it. Cassian stared at the screen, at years of betrayal laid out in spreadsheets and handwritten notes. His breathing slowly steadied. The rage didn't disappear. Elena could still see it burning behind his eyes, but it crystallized into something colder, more controlled, more dangerous. You're right. His voice leveled out. Emotion makes mistakes, and I don't make mistakes. He started pulling up files. We have 3 weeks and 4 days to identify every person in Luca's network, isolate them from my operations, and build a case solid enough that when I move against him, there's no room for retaliation. How do we do that? Cassian looked at her, very carefully, and with absolute secrecy. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling in external security. People Luca doesn't know about. They'll conduct surveillance while you continue gathering intelligence from inside. Luca almost caught me tonight. I know. Something flickered in his expression, almost fear. Which is why you're not going back into his office. Too dangerous. From now on, you work from information he leaves accessible. Meeting notes, scheduling patterns, behavioral analysis. He paused. The kind of intelligence gathering that doesn't require breaking and entering. Elena felt tension she didn't know she was holding release. Okay, but Elena, Cassian's voice dropped. If Luca suspects you know anything, he will kill you. Not as a threat, not as a warning, as certainty. You understanding that? Yes. Good. He turned back to the files. Now help me identify which of these accounts connect to his primary operations. We start cutting off his resources tonight. They worked through the night, Elena cross-referencing bank accounts while Cassian made calls in rapid Italian to people she'd never heard of. By dawn, they'd identified 17 offshore accounts, 12 primary contacts, and a network of safe houses stretching across 3 states. Luca's operation was bigger than either of them had imagined. But now they had the map. At 6 a.m., Cassian leaned back in his chair, eyes bloodshot, jaw dark with stubble. "You should go home. Get some sleep."
"So should you. I don't sleep anymore," he said it matter-of-factly. "Haven't since the night my brother died. Seemed disrespectful somehow, like if I stayed awake I could keep watch over what was left." The admission landed between them, raw, honest. Elena had spent 6 weeks watching Cassian Moretti be perfect, cold, controlled, inhuman. This was the first time she'd seen him break.
"Your brother wouldn't want you destroying yourself." She kept her voice gentle. "He wanted you to be better. You can't do that if you burn out." Cassian looked at her with those pale gray eyes. "You talk about him like you knew him." "I know what you told me. That's enough." Silence stretched. Outside the windows, sunrise was bleeding across the city, orange and red and gold like the world was on fire. "Thank you." Cassian's voice was barely audible. "For staying, for not running when you had every reason to." "You gave me a reason not to run." Elena stood. $75,000 in medical benefits. Best reason I've ever had. He almost smiled. Not quite. Just the ghost of something human flickering across his face before disappearing again. "Practical. I respect that. That's what you hired me for, being practical." She headed for the door, stopped with her hand on the frame. "Get some sleep, Cassian. Even just an hour. You're no good to anyone if you collapse." Then she left before he could argue. The next 2 weeks became a study in controlled paranoia. Elena went through the motions of her job. Scheduling meetings, organizing files, being the clumsy assistant everyone expected, while watching Luca's movements with the intensity of prey tracking a predator. She noticed everything. The way he took calls in empty conference rooms. How he'd disappear for hours without explanation. The subtle changes in his schedule that suggested meetings he wasn't documenting. Every detail went straight to Cassian. They met in his office late at night when the building was empty. Compared notes. Built timelines. Identified patterns that revealed the scope of Luca's planning. It was exhausting, terrifying, and strangely intimate. Because somewhere between surveillance reports and whispered strategy sessions, Elena stopped seeing Cassian as just her boss. Started noticing the way he listened when she talked. The way his expression shifted when she pointed out details he'd missed. How he'd started asking about her mother's treatment, her own well-being, whether she was sleeping enough. Like he actually cared. Which was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with corporate espionage. On the 14th night, something shifted. They were alone in his office reviewing financial transfers when Cassian's phone rang. He looked at the screen, went rigid. "It's Luca." Elena's stomach dropped. "Don't answer." "I have to." Silence triggers suspicion, he answered. "DeMarco, what do you need?" She watched his face. Saw tension tighten around his eyes. "Tonight?" Cassian's voice stayed level. "I'm not available. Reschedule." Pause. "I don't care what you have to discuss. It can wait until morning." More conversation. Cassian's jaw tightened. "Fine. Midnight. My office." He hung up. Elena's pulse hammered. What did he want? "A meeting. Tonight. Says it's urgent." Cassian set the phone down. "He's moving the timeline. I can feel it. You can't meet with him alone." "I don't have a choice. Refusing now makes him suspicious." He stood, walked to the windows. Rain was coming down again, turning the city into a blur of lights and darkness. "But I need you to record the conversation. Audio only. Hidden device." "Where?" "Here." He pointed to a sculpture on a side table. "Small microphone. Active when he arrives. You'll listen from the conference room. If anything happens—" "What do you mean, if anything happens?" Cassian turned to face her. "I mean, if Luca's moving early, he might have decided to eliminate the primary obstacle. Me."
His voice was calm, matter of fact. Which means this meeting could be an execution. Elena's throat closed. Then don't take it. If I don't, he knows I'm onto him. Then he moves immediately and I lose any advantage we've built. Cassian walked toward her. This is the only way. No, there are other ways. We call the police, federal investigators, someone who can...
Who can what? Investigate allegations with no proof that would hold up in court? Cassian's voice hardened. Everything we've gathered would be thrown out as illegally obtained evidence. Luca walks, and everyone who's helped us dies. He was right. Elena knew he was right, but every instinct screamed that walking into a meeting with a man who'd committed murder was suicide. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise nothing. Cassian's expression softened, just barely. But I'll do my best not to get killed. That practical enough for you? Despite everything, Elena almost laughed. Yeah, practical. Even shake it. Midnight arrived too fast. Elena hid in the conference room with headphones on, listening to the microphone feed from Cassian's office. Her hands shook, heart hammered. Every second felt like waiting for a gunshot. The office door opened. Moretti? Luca's voice came through clear, calm. DeMarco, you said this was urgent. Footsteps. The sound of someone sitting. I wanted to discuss the Singapore expansion. I think you're making a mistake. Really? Cassian's tone gave away nothing. Why? Because you're spreading resources too thin, leaving operations here vulnerable. Luca paused. I'm concerned about security gaps. I trust my security is handled. You've assured me of that repeatedly. Of course, but recent developments suggest we may have internal issues, information leaks, unauthorized access to sensitive files. Elena's blood went cold. He knew. Somehow Luca knew someone had been in his office. Interesting. Cassian's voice stayed level. What kind of unauthorized access? Someone bypassed security protocols on the 20th floor 2 weeks ago. Cameras showed a brief loop. Very professional. Luca's tone shifted, became harder. The kind of thing that requires inside knowledge. You're suggesting someone on my team is working against us. I'm suggesting we have a problem that needs solving. Silence stretched. Elena held her breath. Then Cassian spoke. You're right. We do have a problem. Elena's heart stopped. The problem is you've been running a parallel network through my operations for 6 years. Moving weapons, controlled substances, building resources for a coup you're planning in 3 weeks. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Luca laughed, low, dangerous. You know. I know everything. Cassian's voice turned to ice. The offshore accounts, the safe houses, the personnel you've recruited, the warehouse in Brooklyn, all of it. How long? 2 weeks. Let me guess. Luca's voice held something between admiration and rage. Your clumsy little assistant, the one who destroyed your brother's inkwell. She found something. Elena's pulse hammered so hard she thought her chest would explode. Leave her out of this. Can't do that. She's already in it. Luca's chair scraped. Movement. Here's what happens next. You're going to step down quietly. Transfer operations to me. Walk away with your life and enough money to disappear. Or I release documentation showing your entire empire was built on your father's criminal network. Federal prosecutors get everything. You spend the rest of your life in prison. Pause. And your assistant dies screaming. The threat hung in the air like poison. You killed my brother. Cassian's voice was absolutely flat. Sabotaged his car. Made it look like an accident. I have proof. Of course you do. And it won't matter. Luca's voice hardened. Marco wanted to make the family legitimate, weak. Your father understood that weakness gets you killed, so I handled it. He was my brother. He was a liability. No emotion, just fact. Just like you're becoming now. Elena heard movement, fast, sudden, Cassian's voice, sharp. Don't. Then gunfire. 3 shots, deafening through the headphones. Elena's world stopped. She tore off the headphones and ran toward Cassian's office, heart hammering, certain she was about to find him dead on the marble floor. The door burst open under her hands. Cassian stood behind his desk, breathing hard, gun in his hand. Blood splattered across his white shirt. Luca lay on the floor 3 feet away, 2 bullets in his chest, 1 in his shoulder. Not moving. Blood spreading across marble like dark wings. Security poured into the room. Marco appeared from nowhere, took 1 look at the scene, started barking orders in Italian. Cassian lowered the gun. His hands were steady, but his eyes were wild. He looked at Elena standing in the doorway, and something cracked in his expression. "I told you to stay in the conference room." "I heard gunfire."
He drew first. "I had no choice." Cassian's voice was mechanical, shock setting in. "Self-defense. Security footage will prove it." Marco was on the phone. More security arrived. Someone checked Luca's pulse, shook his head. Dead. Elena stood frozen while chaos erupted around her, watched Cassian set the gun down with precise movements, saw the blood on his hands, the way his breathing was too controlled, like he was forcing himself not to fall apart.
Marco approached him. "Ambulance is coming. Police will want statements. I'll handle it." Cassian nodded, didn't speak. Elena moved toward him without thinking, stopped 3 feet away. "Are you hurt?" "No." He looked down at the blood on his shirt. "This is his. You need to sit down." "I need to." His voice fractured. He looked at Luca's body, at the man who'd killed his brother, who'd tried to kill him, who was now just meat and blood on expensive marble. "I need to not be here."
"Okay." Elena's hands were shaking, but her voice held steady. "Then we leave. Marco can handle the police. You need to not be in this room right now." Cassian looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. Then something in his expression shifted. Acceptance. Or maybe just exhaustion. "Okay." She guided him toward the private elevator. Marco didn't stop them, just nodded once as they passed. The elevator descended in silence. Cassian stood perfectly still, blood drying on his hands, expression empty. When the doors opened on the parking garage, Elena led him to his car, got him into the passenger seat even though he protested weakly, took the keys from his jacket pocket. "Where are we going?" His voice sounded distant. "Somewhere that isn't a crime scene." Elena started the engine. "Give me an address." Cassian rattled off coordinates in Brooklyn. She plugged them into the navigation and drove. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a brownstone in Park Slope. Quiet street. Trees, nothing like the glass and steel of Pisano Global. "This is my brother's place." Cassian's voice was barely audible. "I kept it after he died. Couldn't sell it." They went inside. The apartment was frozen in time. Furniture from 6 years ago, books on shelves, photographs on walls showing 2 brothers who looked happy before violence destroyed everything. Cassian stood in the center of the living room and finally broke. His shoulders shook. Breath came in ragged gasps. He pressed his palms against his eyes like he could physically hold himself together and failed completely. Elena had never seen a man come apart like that. Watched him fold into himself. Watched grief and rage and 6 years of buried trauma erupt all at once. She moved toward him, put her arms around him even though she barely reached his shoulders, held on while he shook. "I killed him." Cassian's voice was wrecked. "I shot him, and he's dead, and I don't feel anything except relief." "That's okay." "It's not okay. I'm not supposed to—" His hands were in his hair, pulling. "Marco wanted better, wanted us to be legitimate, and I just killed someone in my office." "He tried to kill you first. That's not the same thing." "Isn't it?" Cassian pulled back, looked at her with red eyes. "How is that different from everything my father did? Everything Marco died trying to escape?" "Because Luca gave you no choice." Elena kept her voice steady. "Your father chose violence. You defended yourself. Those aren't the same." Cassian stared at her like he was searching for permission to believe that. "You should run. Get as far from me as possible. This isn't your world." "I'm already in it. I helped you build the case against Luca. I found the evidence. I'm part of this. You're a 26-year-old barista with an art history degree. You're not built for violence. Neither are you." Elena held his gaze. "Your brother knew that. That's why he tried to get you out. And you can still honor that. You can still become what he wanted you to be." "How?" The word came out broken. "How do I do that when I've got blood on my hands?" "The same way anyone does. One choice at a time, starting now." She reached up, wiped blood from his collar with her sleeve. "You shut down Luca's operation.
You turn his network over to federal investigators. You make the family legitimate like your brother wanted. That's impossible. So was shooting the most dangerous man in your organization and living to tell about it. Elena's voice gentled. But you did that. So you can do this too. Cassian looked at her for a long moment. Rain hammered the windows. The city sprawled outside like a living thing. Then he kissed her. Desperate, rough, like a man drowning, and she was air. Elena kissed him back, tasted blood and fear and something deeper, something that felt like the end of one life and the beginning of another. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Cassian pressed his forehead to hers. I don't know how to be anything except dangerous. Then we'll figure it out together. Elena's hands were in his hair. Starting tomorrow. Tonight you just need to breathe. So he did. They stayed like that in his dead brother's apartment while sirens wailed somewhere in the distance and the rain turned Brooklyn into a watercolor, holding on to each other like the world was ending. Because in a way, it was. The old world. The violent one. The one built on fear and control and buried grief. That world died when Cassian pulled the trigger. What came next was something neither of them knew how to navigate. But at least they weren't navigating it alone. Dawn broke over Brooklyn like a wound that wouldn't close. Elena woke on the couch in Marco's apartment with her neck cramped and her mouth tasting like copper. Cassian sat across from her in an armchair, still wearing yesterday's blood-stained shirt, staring at nothing. He hadn't slept. She could see it in the shadows under his eyes, the rigid set of his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the armrests like he was holding himself in place. How long have you been sitting there? Her voice came out rough. 3 hours? Maybe 4. He didn't look at her. Police called at 5 a.m. They want a formal statement. Marco's handling the initial report, but they need me downtown by 9. Elena sat up. Every muscle in her body ached. What did Marco tell them? The truth. That Luca drew a weapon during a private meeting. That I defended myself. Security footage backs it up. Cassian's voice was flat, mechanical. Open and shut self-defense. I'll be cleared by afternoon. Then why do you look like you're about to fall apart? Because cleared doesn't mean clean. He finally looked at her. His eyes were bloodshot, haunted. Luca was head of security for 15 years. Respected. Connected. People will ask questions. Federal investigators will dig into why my head of security tried to kill me. And when they start digging, they'll find his network, Elena finished. The parallel operation, the weapons trafficking, everything. Yes. Cassian stood, walked to the windows. Rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray, pregnant with the threat of more. Which means I have maybe 72 hours before everything I've built collapses. The company, my reputation, any chance at becoming legitimate. Elena's brain kicked into gear. Unless you control the narrative. Turn over Luca's files to federal investigators yourself. Cooperate fully. Show them you had no knowledge of his operations. They won't believe that. They will if the evidence supports it. She stood, joints popping. We have everything. His offshore accounts, personnel files, communications showing he operated independently. You present it as discovering a cancer inside your organization and cutting it out. Cassian turned, studied her with those pale gray eyes. You think like a criminal. I think like someone who's read enough Renaissance history to know how power actually works. Elena moved toward him. The Medicis didn't stay in control by being clean. They stayed in control by being smart about their dirt. Something flickered in his expression, almost a smile. Quoting Italian banking families at me. That's a choice. It's the only choice that doesn't end with you in prison. She held his gaze. You wanted to honor your brother's memory. Make the family legitimate. This is how you do it. Full cooperation. Total transparency. Become the victim of Luca's betrayal instead of his accomplice. Cassian was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the city was waking up. Sirens in the distance. Traffic building. Normal people going to normal jobs with normal problems. Okay, his voice steadied. We do it your way. Marco's already coordinating with external security. I'll contact federal prosecutors directly. Offer complete access to Luca's network in exchange for immunity. What about the rest of his people? The ones loyal to him? Marco's handling that, locking down operations. Anyone connected to Luca gets isolated pending investigation. Cassian pulled out his phone. By tonight, Luca's network won't exist anymore.
Elena felt something loosen in her chest. Relief. Or maybe just exhaustion. What do you need me to do? Go home. Get sleep. Stay away from the office for 48 hours. He met her eyes. When federal investigators start asking questions, you're just an assistant who happened to discover irregularities in shipping manifests. Nothing more. That's it? I just disappear while you handle everything?
That's exactly it. Cassian's voice went gentle, dangerous combination. Elena, you've already risked more than you should have. If investigators connect you to the surveillance, the break-in, any of it, they won't. I was careful. Careful doesn't matter if someone decides to make you a target. He moved closer. Close enough that she could see the blood still dried in the creases of his collar. Luca's network had people embedded everywhere. Some of them are still out there, unknown. And if they think you were involved in bringing him down, then what? I hide forever? You hide for 48 hours while I make sure they're neutralized. His jaw tightened. After that, you come back. Resume your job. We move forward. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she wasn't some fragile thing that needed protecting. But the exhaustion in his eyes, the blood on his clothes, the reality of a man dead on his office floor stopped her. Okay, 48 hours. Thank you. Cassian pulled out his wallet, handed her $500 bills. Cash. Don't use cards. Stay with a friend, somewhere nobody from the office knows about. Elena took the money. It felt heavier than paper should. This feels like goodbye. It's not. It's just precaution. He touched her face. Brief, gentle. I'll call you when it's safe. I promise. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that this was just temporary measures and not him pushing her away before things got worse. But she'd spent 6 weeks watching Cassian Moretti operate. She knew when he was being protective and when he was being strategic. This felt like both. Elena went to her friend Sarah's apartment in Queens. Grad school roommate, reliable. Asked no questions when Elena showed up at 8 a.m. looking like she'd been through a war. Rough week? Sarah handed her coffee and a blanket. You have no idea. Want to talk about it? Not even a little bit. Sarah nodded, turned on Netflix, left Elena alone with her thoughts and the growing certainty that something was about to go very wrong. The first call came at noon. Unknown number. Elena let it go to voicemail. The second came 20 minutes later, same number. This time she answered. Elena Whitmore? Male voice. Professional. Cold. Who is this? Special Agent Marcus Webb, FBI. I need you to come to our field office for questioning regarding the death of Luca DeMarco. Her stomach dropped. I don't know anything about that. Ma'am, we have security footage showing you entering Mr. DeMarco's private office 2 weeks ago. We need to discuss what you were doing there. The world tilted. They knew. Somehow they knew about the break-in. I was organizing archive files. Mr. Moretti asked me to. We can discuss this at the field office, or I can send agents to pick you up. Your choice. Elena's hands shook. I want a lawyer. That's your right. But cooperation now makes things easier later. Webb's tone shifted, almost sympathetic. We're not interested in prosecuting administrative staff, Ms. Whitmore. We just need to understand what you saw, what you found. I need to think about it. You have 2 hours. After that, we proceed without your cooperation. He gave her an address. Federal Plaza, 3rd floor. Ask for me at reception. The line went dead. Elena sat on Sarah's couch, staring at her phone, trying to breathe through rising panic. The FBI knew about the break-in, which meant someone had talked, or the camera loop hadn't been as clean as Cassian thought, or her phone rang again. This time it was Cassian. Don't go. His voice was sharp, urgent. The FBI just contacted you, I know. Don't go to their office. How did you... Because they contacted me too. And Grace and Marco. They're rounding up everyone connected to the investigation. He sounded like he was moving, fast. This isn't standard procedure. This is a coordinated sweep. What does that mean? It means someone tipped them off. Gave them enough to launch a full investigation before I could control the narrative. His breathing was harsh. Elena, listen to me very carefully. Do not talk to federal agents without a lawyer. Do not go to their office. Do not... The call cut off. Elena stared at her phone. Tried calling back. Straight to voicemail. Then her screen lit up with a text from an unknown number. If you want to know who really killed Cassian's brother, meet me at Pier 17. 1 hour. Come alone. Elena's blood turned to ice. She should ignore it, should call Cassian back, should do literally anything except walk into an obvious trap. But the message said, who really killed? Past tense. Like Marco's death wasn't as simple as Luca sabotaging a car. Like there was more to the story. Elena grabbed her jacket and headed for the door. Diam gig. Pier 17 jutted into the East River like a broken finger. Old warehouses, rusted shipping containers. The kind of place where bodies turned up and nobody asked questions. Elena arrived 40 minutes later, heart hammering, every survival instinct screaming that this was stupidity beyond measure. A figure stood at the end of the pier, back to the water. Face hidden in shadow. As Elena got closer, the figure stepped into weak sunlight. Grace. Cassian's operations director stood there in a business suit and heels completely wrong for a derelict pier, holding a tablet like it was a weapon. You came. Grace's voice was cold. I wasn't sure you would. Your text said you know who killed Marco. Elena stopped 10 feet away. So talk. First, you need to understand something about Cassian Moretti. Grace's expression was unreadable. He's not the man you think he is. The grieving brother, the reluctant heir trying to go legitimate. That's a story he tells himself to sleep at night. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that Marco Moretti didn't die in a car accident. Grace pulled up something on her tablet, turned it around. He was murdered, but not by Luca. The screen showed a document. Police report from 6 years ago. Vehicle inspection notes. Brake line severed. Steering column compromised. Everything Elena had seen in Luca's files. But at the bottom, in small type, was a notation she'd missed. Secondary inspection requested by C. Moretti. Evidence sealed pending family review. Elena's mouth went dry. What is this? This is Cassian requesting a second investigation into his brother's death, 2 days after the accident. Grace's voice was sharp. Why would he do that unless he already suspected it wasn't an accident? Because he wanted answers. No, because he already knew what happened. Grace pulled up another document. Bank transfer records. 3 days before Marco died, Cassian transferred $2 million to an offshore account. That account was later traced to a contract killer operating in the Catskills, the same area where Marco died. The pier tilted under Elena's feet. You're saying Cassian killed his own brother. I'm saying Cassian paid someone to kill his brother, then blamed Luca, kept evidence against Luca for years as insurance. Grace's eyes were ice. And when you stumbled onto those files, he saw an opportunity. Let you think you discovered the truth. Used you to take out the one person who knew what really happened. That's insane. Why would Cassian kill his own brother? Because Marco was going to expose the family business to federal prosecutors, turn state's evidence, destroy everything their father built. Grace moved closer. Cassian couldn't let that happen, so he eliminated the threat, made it look like an accident. And when Luca figured it out years later, Cassian had to eliminate him too. Elena's brain was short-circuiting. You're lying. Am I? Grace pulled up more files, communications logs between Cassian and the offshore account. Encrypted messages discussing the problem in the Catskills and permanent solutions. I've spent 6 years watching him, documenting everything, building a case, and now I'm giving it to federal investigators. Why tell me this? Because you're the only witness who can confirm Cassian knew about Luca's files before the shooting. Grace's voice went hard. You broke into Luca's office, found evidence, gave it to Cassian, and hours later Luca was dead. That's not self-defense, that's premeditated murder. Elena's hands were shaking. I don't believe you. Then ask yourself why the FBI contacted you so quickly, how they knew about your break-in. Grace smiled. Cold. I told them. Gave them everything, security footage, your access logs, proof that Cassian used you as a weapon against Luca. The world was tilting, spinning. Elena grabbed a shipping container for support. You're working with the FBI. I'm working against a murderer who's been hiding behind his brother's memory for 6 years. Grace's voice cracked, just slightly. Marco Moretti was a good man. He wanted to save his family, and Cassian killed him for it. I won't let that go unpunished. Even if it means destroying me too. You chose to work for him, to help him, to fall for whatever story he sold you about grief and redemption. Grace's expression hardened. Now you live with the consequences. Either you cooperate with federal investigators and testify against Cassian, or you go down with him. Your choice. Elena's throat closed, every piece of the last 6 weeks rearranging itself into a different pattern. The way Cassian had hired her so quickly, how he'd pushed her toward investigating Luca, the convenient discovery of evidence proving Luca's guilt. It all felt different now, staged, like she'd been a puppet and never saw the strings. I need proof, real proof, not documents that could be fabricated. Then talk to Marco's widow. Grace pulled out a business card, handed it over. She's been waiting 6 years to tell someone the truth about what Cassian did. Maybe she can convince you. Elena took the card, stared at the address printed in neat type. Brooklyn. Not far from Marco's apartment. The apartment Cassian had taken her to last night. Where they'd kissed. Where he'd broken down in her arms. Had that been real, or just another manipulation? 1 hour, Grace's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. After that, I tell federal investigators you're uncooperative. They'll assume you're complicit, and you'll spend the next 20 years in prison alongside Cassian. Then Grace walked away, heels clicking against concrete, disappeared into the maze of containers and warehouses like she'd never been there. Elena stood alone at the end of the pier, holding a business card and the growing certainty that everything she thought she knew was a lie. The address led to a townhouse in Cobble Hill. Expensive, quiet, the kind of neighborhood where people raised families and pretended violence didn't exist. Elena rang the doorbell with shaking hands. A woman answered, mid-30s, dark hair, tired eyes. She looked at Elena for a long moment before speaking. You're the assistant, the one he used to kill Luca. Elena's stomach turned. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Grace called, said you might come. The woman stepped back. I'm Isabella Moretti, Marco's widow. Come in before someone sees you. The interior was beautiful. Hardwood floors, original molding, photographs everywhere. Isabella and Marco on their wedding day, on vacation, laughing at something off camera. A whole life captured in frames. A life that ended 6 years ago. Why did Grace send me here? Elena's voice came out smaller than she wanted. Because you don't believe her. You think Cassian is the victim, the grieving brother trying to honor Marco's memory. Isabella sat on a couch, gestured for Elena to sit across from her. I thought that too, for a while, until I found Marco's journal. She pulled a leather-bound book from a drawer, set it on the coffee table between them. Marco kept detailed records, dates, conversations, evidence of everything the family was involved in. Isabella's hands trembled. He was going to testify, give it all to federal prosecutors, destroy the criminal empire his father built. Cassian said Marco wanted the family to go legitimate. Marco wanted the family to face consequences. There's a difference. Isabella opened the journal, pointed to an entry dated 3 weeks before Marco died. Read. Elena leaned forward. The handwriting was neat, controlled. Cassian knows about the prosecution, confronted me tonight, said I was betraying the family, that our father would be ashamed. I told him our father was a monster, and I won't protect his legacy anymore. He looked at me like I was already dead. I think he might actually do it. I think my brother might kill me to protect an empire built on blood. Elena's hands went numb. She flipped ahead, found more entries. Marco documenting threats, Cassian pressuring him to reconsider, the growing certainty that his brother saw him as a liability that needed eliminating. The final entry was dated 2 days before the accident. Meeting with prosecutors tomorrow. Cassian doesn't know the exact timing. I've been careful. But if something happens to me, if this looks like an accident, it wasn't. It was him, my brother, the only family I have left, and I'm terrified he's going to kill me for trying to do the right thing. Elena set the journal down with shaking hands. This could be fabricated. It's not.
I had it authenticated by 3 separate handwriting experts. It's Marco's journal, his words. Isabella's voice cracked. And the next day he died on a mountain road with severed brake lines and a steering column that had been tampered with. Cassian blamed Luca.
Cassian blamed the man who actually carried out the hit, who arranged the accident, who covered up the evidence. Isabella leaned forward. But Luca didn't order it, Cassian did. And when Luca found proof years later, the bank transfers, the communications with the contract killer, he tried to leverage it, tried to take over the organization using evidence of Cassian's crime. The room was spinning. Elena pressed her palms against her eyes. So Cassian killed him too, before he could expose the truth. And used you to do it. Made you think you were discovering evidence of Luca's guilt when really you were finding evidence Cassian had planted years ago. Isabella's eyes were hard. You were the perfect weapon. Smart enough to find what he wanted you to find. Naive enough not to question why it was so easy.
I'm not naive. Then why are you here? Why aren't you running as far from Cassian Moretti as possible? Isabella stood, walked to the window. Because part of you wants me to be wrong. Wants to believe the man you've been falling for isn't a murderer who killed his own brother. Elena's throat closed. Because Isabella was right, part of her was desperately searching for an explanation that made Cassian innocent, that turned this back into a story about grief and redemption instead of calculated fratricide.
What do you want from me? I want you to testify. Tell federal investigators everything, how Cassian manipulated you into surveilling Luca, how he used information you provided to justify killing him. Isabella turned. Her eyes were wet. I want justice for my husband, the man who tried to do the right thing and died for it. If I testify, I go to prison too. I broke into Luca's office, stole confidential files. I'm an accomplice. Grace says prosecutors will offer immunity in exchange for cooperation, full testimony against Cassian. You walk away clean. And if they don't? Isabella's expression hardened. Then you made your choice when you decided to work for a killer. Bob.
Elena left the townhouse an hour later with Marco's journal photocopies in her bag and her entire world rearranged into something unrecognizable. She walked through Brooklyn in a daze, tried calling Cassian 17 times. Every call went straight to voicemail. Finally, at 8 p.m., he called back. Where are you? His voice was tight, controlled. I've been trying to reach you for hours. I was talking to Marco's widow. Silence. Long enough that Elena thought the call had dropped. Then, what did she tell you? That you killed your brother, paid a contract killer to sabotage his car, blamed Luca, used me to cover it up. Elena's voice shook. Tell me she's lying. Elena, tell me you didn't murder Marco. More silence. Then Cassian's voice, quieter. It's more complicated than that. The admission hit like a physical blow. Oh my God, you actually did it. Ooh, Marco was going to destroy everything, turn over evidence that would have put the entire family in prison. Our cousins, our associates, hundreds of people whose lives depended on the organization staying intact. Cassian sounded exhausted. I tried to convince him, spent months arguing, offering alternatives. He wouldn't listen. So you killed him. I made an impossible choice. Save one person or save hundreds. And I chose hundreds. His breathing was harsh. I've lived with that decision every day for 6 years. It's destroyed me. But I'd make the same choice again because the alternative was watching everyone I'm responsible for go to prison or die. Elena couldn't breathe. You lied to me. I protected you. You used me as a weapon against Luca. I gave you a job, money, a way to save your mother, everything you needed. Cassian's voice hardened. And yes, I used what you found to eliminate a threat. That's what people in my position do. We use available resources. I'm not a resource. I'm a person.
You're both. No apology in his tone. Just fact. And now you have a choice. You can cooperate with federal investigators, testify against me, walk away clean while I spend the rest of my life in prison, or you can remember that I gave you everything you asked for and keep your mouth shut. Elena's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. That's not a choice. That's a threat. It's reality. Choose carefully. He paused. I'll call you tomorrow.
We'll figure this out.
The line went dead. Elena stood on a Brooklyn street corner, surrounded by normal people living normal lives, and understood with perfect clarity that she'd been played from the beginning. Every smile, every moment of vulnerability, every touch had been calculated. Cassian Moretti hadn't fallen for her. He'd weaponized her, turned her into exactly what he needed when he needed it. And she'd let him. Because she was desperate and stupid and so focused on saving her mother that she didn't see the monster standing right in front of her. Her phone buzzed. Text from Grace. FBI wants your statement tomorrow. 9 a.m., Federal Plaza. Don't be late. This is your only chance at immunity. Another text. This one from an unknown number. Testify against Cassian and your mother's treatment stops immediately. Medical insurance revoked. Choose wisely. M. M for Marco. Marco who handled operations. Marco who'd been Cassian's friend since childhood. The threat was clear. Cooperate with federal investigators and her mother died. Stay silent and Elena became complicit in fratricide. She leaned against a building, stomach heaving, vision blurring. There was no good choice. No way out that didn't end with someone destroyed. Her phone rang again. This time it was the hospital.
Miss Whitmore, this is Mount Sinai. Your mother's taken a turn. You need to come immediately.
Elena ran 6 blocks to the subway, took the train to the Upper East Side, burst into Mount Sinai's oncology ward at 9:15 p.m. with her heart trying to tear through her ribs. Her mother's room was at the end of a long hallway. Machines beeped. Monitors showed numbers Elena didn't understand. And lying in the bed, looking smaller than she should, was the woman who'd raised her alone after her father died. Margaret Whitmore opened her eyes when Elena entered, smiled weakly. Hey, baby.
Mom. Elena grabbed her hand. It felt like paper, fragile. What happened? Infection. They're handling it. Her mother's voice was thin. Don't look so worried. I'm tougher than I look. A doctor appeared in the doorway. Young, tired. Ms. Whitmore, can I speak with you outside? Elena followed him into the hallway. Knew what was coming before he said it. The infection is aggressive. We're treating it, but her immune system is compromised from treatment. The next 48 hours are critical. He hesitated. I need to be honest. Without continued treatment, her chances drop significantly. She's getting continued treatment. I have insurance through my job. About that. The doctor pulled out a tablet. We received notice this afternoon that your coverage has been flagged for review, pending investigation of your employer. Until that's resolved, we can't guarantee... No. Elena's voice cracked. No, you have to treat her. Whatever it costs, I'll figure it out. Ms. Whitmore, experimental cancer treatment runs $30,000 a month. Unless you have that in cash or can guarantee insurance coverage, I'll get it. She had no idea how, but she'd figure it out. Just don't stop treatment. The doctor nodded, sympathetic. 48 hours. After that, we need confirmation of payment or we have to discuss alternative options. He walked away. Elena went back into her mother's room, sat beside the bed, held her hand while machines beeped and the city hummed outside, and her entire world collapsed into a single impossible choice. Testify against Cassian and her mother died. Stay silent and become an accomplice to murder. There was no third option, no clever solution, no way to save everyone. Her phone buzzed. Text from Cassian. I know about your mother. I'm sorry, but this doesn't change what needs to happen. Make the right choice. Elena stared at the message, at the man who'd killed his brother and used her and was now leveraging her mother's life to buy her silence. She'd thought he was capable of redemption, thought somewhere under the ice was a human being worth saving. She'd been wrong. Cassian Moretti was exactly what he appeared to be. A killer. A manipulator. A monster in an expensive suit. And Elena had helped him, fed him information, given him the weapon he needed to eliminate his enemy. She was complicit, whether she testified or not. Another text, this one from Isabella. FBI needs an answer by midnight. After that, the immunity offer expires. You'll be charged as an accomplice. Please, do the right thing. Justice for Marco. Elena looked at her mother, at the woman who'd sacrificed everything to give her a chance at a better life, who worked 3 jobs to send her to college, who never complained, never asked for anything except that Elena be happy.
Saving her mother meant letting a murderer walk free. Letting her mother die meant honoring a dead man she'd never met. There was no right answer, just two different kinds of wrong. Elena pulled out her phone, stared at the screen, FBI contact information on one side, Cassian's number on the other. 48 hours until her mother's treatment stopped. 9 hours until the immunity offer expired. Outside the window, Manhattan glittered like a city made of broken glass. Beautiful and deadly and completely indifferent to human suffering. Elena had spent 6 weeks believing she was smart enough to survive in Cassian Moretti's world. Now she understood the truth. Nobody survived. They just chose which way they wanted to break. Her finger hovered over the screen. FBI or Cassian, justice or survival. The right thing or the only thing. She started to dial. Then her mother's monitor started screaming. Doctors flooded the room, pushed Elena into the hallway. She stood outside watching through glass while they worked, while machines howled, while her mother's body fought an infection that treatment could stop if Elena just had the money. Money Cassian controlled. 5 minutes later, the monitor quieted. The doctors stepped back. Her mother was stable, for now, but the clock was ticking. Elena pulled out her phone, made her choice, dialed. The line rang twice before someone answered. Special Agent Webb, FBI. Elena's voice came out steady, cold, like something inside her had finally frozen solid. This is Elena Whitmore. I'm ready to make a statement about Cassian Moretti, about everything. Silence on the other end. Then, we're listening. Not over the phone. I need it in writing, full immunity, protection, and guaranteed medical coverage for my mother. All of it documented before I say another word. That can be arranged. Federal Plaza, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I'll be there. Elena's hand was shaking, but her voice held steady. And Agent Webb? When I'm done testifying, Cassian Moretti won't just be facing murder charges. He'll be facing a conspiracy that goes back 6 years. Everything. Names, accounts, the entire network. We'll be ready. Elena hung up. Stood in the hospital hallway while normal people wandered past with normal problems and normal lives. She'd just signed Cassian Moretti's death warrant, and her own, because men like him didn't go quietly, didn't accept betrayal, didn't let witnesses live long enough to destroy them. The moment Elena walked into that FBI office tomorrow, she became a target, but at least her mother would survive. The FBI would guarantee treatment. Make sure Margaret Whitmore lived even if Elena didn't. That was enough. It had to be. Elena walked back into her mother's room, sat beside the bed, held her hand while machines beeped rhythm and the city moved outside, and everything she thought she knew about herself rearranged into something she didn't recognize. 6 weeks ago, she'd been a broke barista with an art history degree and no options. Now she was a federal witness preparing to bring down New York's most dangerous criminal organization. The transformation should have felt empowering. Instead, it just felt like dying in slow motion. Her phone buzzed one more time. Text from Cassian. I know what you're planning. Don't do this, please. The please almost broke her, because it sounded human, real, like the man who'd kissed her in his dead brother's apartment was actually capable of begging. But Elena had read Marco's journal, seen the evidence, talked to Isabella. She knew what Cassian was, what he'd always been, and she wasn't going to let him destroy anyone else. She typed back, I already did. Then she blocked his number, deleted their message history, erased every trace of him from her phone like that would somehow erase 6 weeks of mistakes and manipulation. It wouldn't. Nothing would. But at least she could stop making new ones. Elena sat in the hospital room, holding her mother's hand, watching dawn break over a city that ate people whole and never apologized. Tomorrow she'd walk into the FBI office and tell them everything. Tonight she just needed to breathe and pretend she wasn't absolutely terrified of what came next. Elena never made it to the FBI office. At 7 a.m., 2 hours before her scheduled testimony, 3 SUVs surrounded her mother's hospital room. Men in tactical gear flooded the hallway. Not FBI, not police. Private security with the kind of weapons that said they weren't interested in arrests. Elena was in the bathroom when it happened, heard shouting, her mother's monitor screaming, the distinctive crack of a door being forced open. She locked the bathroom door with shaking hands, pulled out her phone. No signal. They were jamming communications. Through the thin door she heard voices, calm, professional, terrifying in their efficiency. "Clear the room. Patient comes with us. Anyone interferes, put them down." Her mother's voice, weak but defiant. "Don't touch her. Whatever this is about, leave my daughter alone." "Your daughter's not here, ma'am, but she will be. And when she arrives, you're going to convince her to make a very different choice than the one she made last night." Footsteps. Equipment being disconnected. The sound of her mother being moved. Elena pressed her fist against her mouth to keep from screaming. Every instinct screamed to burst out, to fight, to do something. But she'd watched enough of Cassian's world to know that getting herself killed right now helped no one. The voices faded. Elevator doors opened and closed. Silence settled like ash. Elena waited 3 full minutes before unlocking the bathroom door. The hospital room was empty. Bed stripped, monitors dark. No sign of struggle except a single syringe on the floor, still capped, and a note taped to the window. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Cassian's precise script. Brooklyn Navy Yard. Warehouse 7. Come alone. Unarmed. You have 2 hours before your mother's medical equipment fails. Choose wisely. Elena's hand shook so badly the paper rattled. He'd taken her mother, ripped her out of critical care and dragged her to a location designed for bodies that nobody found. This wasn't negotiation. This was execution with extra steps. She pulled out her phone, called Agent Webb. It rang once before a different voice answered. "Ms. Whitmore. Change of plans." Male voice. Unfamiliar. "Your testimony is no longer required. We've received alternative evidence regarding the Moretti case. You're free to go." Elena's blood went cold. "What alternative evidence?" "That's classified. But I can tell you that Cassian Moretti has been very cooperative. Provided documentation showing Luca DeMarco's sole responsibility for all criminal operations. Your involvement is no longer relevant to our investigation." "That's bullshit. I was supposed to have immunity, protection. Your mother's medical situation is between you and the hospital. The FBI has no jurisdiction over private health care." The voice went flat. "Don't contact this number again." The line went dead. Elena stood in an empty hospital room and understood with perfect clarity what had just happened. Cassian had bought the FBI, or threatened them, or provided evidence so damning that they'd rather take his cooperation than her testimony. She was alone, no protection, no immunity, no leverage except the knowledge that her mother had maybe 2 hours before critical care equipment ran out of battery. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "Marco sends his regards. Clock is ticking." See Marco, Cassian's childhood friend, the man who'd threatened her mother's insurance yesterday, the man who was probably at the warehouse right now, making sure Elena understood exactly how powerless she was. She had 2 choices: walk into the warehouse and die, or run and let her mother die. Neither was a choice. Both were surrender. Elena looked out the window at Manhattan sprawling below, thought about the girl who'd walked into Pisano Global 6 weeks ago with a coffee cup in desperation. That girl would have run, would have found some way to rationalize survival over sacrifice. But that girl was gone, burned away by blood and betrayal and the growing certainty that Cassian Moretti had destroyed every version of herself except the one willing to fight. Elena left the hospital, caught a cab to Brooklyn, gave the driver an address 3 blocks from the Navy Yard, and paid cash. Then she walked the rest of the way alone. Shimgad. The Brooklyn Navy Yard sprawled across 300 acres of industrial wasteland. Derelict warehouses, rusted cranes, shipping containers stacked like gravestones. The kind of place where screams disappeared into wind and water and nobody came looking. Warehouse 7 sat at the far end, separated from other structures by 100 yards of cracked pavement and dead grass. No windows. Single entrance. The architectural equivalent of a trap. Elena approached on foot, hands visible. No weapon, just her phone in her pocket and the growing certainty that she wasn't walking out of this alive. The warehouse door was open, darkness inside. She stepped through. It took her eyes 3 seconds to adjust. The space was massive, 50 feet high, rusted catwalks overhead, industrial machinery long since gone to rot. And in the center, surrounded by battery-powered medical equipment and armed men in tactical gear, was her mother. Margaret Whitmore sat in a wheelchair, oxygen mask over her face, IV line running from her arm to a portable monitor. She looked small, fragile, terrified, but alive. Cassian stood 10 feet away, perfect suit, perfectly still, watching Elena with those pale gray eyes like he was calculating exactly how this would end. "You came," his voice echoed in the empty space. "I wasn't sure you would. You kidnapped my mother from critical care. What did you think would happen? I thought you'd make the smart choice. Call the FBI, bring armed agents, try to save yourself." He tilted his head slightly. "But you came alone, unarmed, which means you're either very brave or very stupid. I'm neither. I'm just tired of people I love being used as weapons against me." Elena's hands were shaking, but her voice held steady. "Let her go. Whatever this is about, it's between us." "No, it's about what you did last night." Cassian's expression didn't change. "You called federal investigators, agreed to testify against me, tried to destroy everything I've built. You killed your brother. You used me. You deserve to be destroyed." "Deserve?" Cassian laughed, short, sharp. "You think the world operates on deserve? You think justice exists outside stories we tell ourselves to sleep at night?" He moved closer, slow, deliberate. "I killed Marco because he was going to destroy hundreds of lives. I used you because you were available and useful, and I'll do it again because that's what survival requires." "That's not survival. That's being a monster. There's no difference." He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that Elena could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw, the blood on his cufflink that he'd missed. "You spent 6 weeks in my world. You saw how it works. Power, control, making impossible choices because the alternative is worse. You think you're different? You made the same choice I did when you agreed to testify. You chose your mother's survival over everything else. That's not the same thing, isn't it?" Cassian's voice dropped. "You were willing to let me rot in prison, willing to become a federal witness, all to save one person. That's exactly what I did. The only difference is you feel bad about it." Elena's throat closed. Because he was right. She'd been willing to sacrifice him, to become what he was, to cross every line if it meant her mother survived. The only difference was Cassian had been doing it for years and didn't pretend otherwise. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to understand something." Cassian pulled out his phone, turned it around, showed her a video. The screen displayed Federal Plaza, FBI agents escorting Isabella Moretti in handcuffs, her face bloody, clothes torn, fighting every step. "Marco's widow, arrested this morning on charges of conspiracy to commit murder." Cassian's voice was flat. "Turns out she was working with Luca, planning the coup together, using you to build a case against me while she positioned herself to take over the empire." Elena's world tilted. "That's not possible. Bank records don't lie. Neither do communications logs showing she'd been coordinating with Luca for 3 years. He pulled up more files. Isabella Moretti wasn't the grieving widow seeking justice. She was Luca's partner, helping him build his network. And when you started investigating, she saw an opportunity. Feed you a story about Marco's murder, turn you into a weapon against me. The video kept playing. Isabella screaming at agents, denying everything, being shoved into a vehicle. She lied to you. Cassian's eyes held Elena's. Showed you fabricated journal entries, staged evidence. Made you believe I killed my brother so you'd testify. And you fell for it because you wanted to believe I was the monster. The bank transfers, the contract killer. The police report, were real, but they weren't mine. Cassian pulled up another document. They were Luca's. He killed Marco on Isabella's orders, made it look like a car accident. And when I figured it out years later, I kept the evidence as insurance, waited for the right moment to use it. Elena couldn't breathe. Every piece of certainty she'd built over the last 24 hours was crumbling. You're lying. I have no reason to lie. You already know what I am, what I'm capable of. He stepped closer. But I didn't kill my brother. Luca did. Isabella ordered it. And they've spent 6 years building a case to pin it on me while planning to take over everything I built. Why would Isabella kill her own husband? Because Marco was going to testify, destroy the family business, leave her with nothing. Cassian's jaw tightened. She couldn't let that happen. So she hired Luca to eliminate the problem, made it look like an accident, and when I started getting too close to the truth, she used you as a distraction. Elena's legs felt weak. She grabbed a rusted support beam for balance. Grace, she showed me the files, the police reports, everything. Grace works for Isabella, has for 5 years. Cassian pulled up personnel files. She was placed inside my organization to feed information, build evidence, create a narrative that made me look guilty while Isabella positioned herself to inherit the empire. I don't believe you. Then ask yourself why the FBI dropped your testimony so quickly. Why they arrested Isabella this morning instead of me. Cassian's voice went quiet. Because federal investigators saw the same evidence I did. The real evidence. And they realized Isabella had been manipulating everyone, including them. Elena's brain was short-circuiting. Nothing made sense. Every fact she'd relied on was inverting. Marco's journal, his handwriting, was real. But the entries you saw were selectively edited. Isabella removed the parts where he talked about her betrayal, her coordination with Luca, the fact that he'd discovered she was embezzling millions from the family business. Cassian held out his phone. This is the complete journal. Read it yourself. Elena took the phone with shaking hands, scrolled through entries, found the passages Isabella had shown her, then found new ones. Entries about Isabella meeting with Luca in secret, moving money offshore, Marco's growing suspicion that his wife was planning something terrible. The final entry was dated the day before he died. Isabella knows I'm going to the prosecutors. She's been too calm, too understanding. I think she's planning something. I think she might actually... No, I can't believe that. She's my wife. She loves me. But if something happens, if this goes wrong, Cassian needs to know the truth. Isabella and Luca are working together. They're going to destroy everything, and I'm the only one who can stop them. Elena set the phone down. Her hands were numb. This could still be fabricated. It was authenticated by the same handwriting experts Isabella used, same forensics, same everything. Cassian's expression was unreadable. I've spent 6 years tracking the people who killed my brother, building evidence, waiting for them to make a mistake. And when you started investigating Luca, I saw an opportunity. Let you discover part of the truth. Enough to make you useful without putting you in complete danger. You still used me. Yes. Because I needed someone Isabella and Luca wouldn't see as a threat. Someone who could move through the organization gathering information without triggering suspicion. He paused. You were perfect for that. Smart, observant, desperate enough to take risks. And everything else? The office, the conversations, the night in Marco's apartment was real. Cassian's voice dropped. I hired you because you were useful. But somewhere in those 6 weeks you became something else, something I didn't plan for. He moved closer. You saw me, not the empire, not the violence, just the parts of me I thought died with Marco. And I let you see them because I'm weak, because after 6 years of ice and control, I wanted to feel human again. Elena's throat was tight. That doesn't make this okay. No, it doesn't. Cassian reached out. Stopped just short of touching her face. But it's the truth. I didn't kill my brother. I loved him. And I've spent 6 years trying to honor what he wanted while destroying the people who murdered him. By becoming exactly what they were. By surviving long enough to make them pay. His hand dropped. And now they have. Isabella's in federal custody. Luca's dead. The network they built is dismantled. Marco can finally rest. What about me? Elena's voice cracked. What happens to me now? Cassian looked at her for a long moment. Rain had started outside. She could hear it hammering the warehouse roof like bullets. That depends on you. Meaning what? Meaning I can't let you testify. Can't let you walk into federal investigations with half-truths and fabricated evidence that Isabella planted. His eyes were ice. But I also can't kill you. Because you're the only person in 6 years who saw me as something other than a monster, and losing that would destroy whatever's left of me. So what are my options? You disappear. New identity. New city. Enough money to start over and take care of your mother's treatment anywhere in the world. Cassian's voice was absolutely level. Or you stay. Work with me. Help me transform this organization into what Marco wanted. Legitimate. Clean.
Something that doesn't require murder to survive. Elena laughed. It came out broken. Those aren't real options. Those are both versions of surrender.
No. They're both versions of survival. He stepped closer. The difference is one leaves you alone. The other leaves you with me. Why would I stay with you after everything? Because you understand me. Cassian's control was fracturing. She could hear it in his voice. Because you've seen the worst parts of what I am, and you're still standing here. Because despite everything, you felt it too. In Marco's apartment. In my office. The connection that shouldn't exist but does. That wasn't real. That was manipulation. It was both. He grabbed her shoulders. Not rough. Desperate. I manipulated you into helping me. But I didn't manipulate what I felt when you stayed. When you saw me break and didn't run. When you challenged me and pushed back and refused to be just another person terrified of what I could do. Elena could feel his hands shaking. Saw the cracks in his armor, the exhaustion, the grief. The 6 years of ice melting into something raw and human and terrifying because it meant he was real. I can't trust you. I know. Cassian's voice dropped to almost nothing. But you can work with me. Help me honor Marco's memory. Build something that matters instead of just surviving. By staying in your world, by becoming complicit in everything you've done, by becoming part of what comes next. Something better. His eyes held hers. I can't undo the past. Can't bring Marco back. Can't erase the violence. But I can build a future where his death meant something. Where the family becomes legitimate. Where you and I create something real instead of just destroying each other. Elena wanted to say no. Wanted to take the money and run and never look back. But she'd spent 6 weeks watching Cassian Moretti, seen the intelligence, the control, the capacity for both brutality and something approaching tenderness. And she'd felt it. In his office, in Marco's apartment, the connection that shouldn't exist but did. The possibility that maybe, buried under ice and violence and 6 years of grief, was a man capable of becoming something better. If she was willing to help him. If she was willing to risk everything on the possibility that he wasn't lying. If I stay, her voice came out rough. If I do this, things change. No more manipulation, no more using me as a weapon. We're partners or I walk. Something flickered in Cassian's expression. Relief, or maybe hope. Partners. And my mother gets the best medical care available. Anywhere in the world, whatever it costs. Already arranged. Mount Sinai's reinstating her treatment immediately. Full coverage, no restrictions. Elena looked past him at her mother, still sitting in the wheelchair, oxygen mask on, looking at Elena with eyes that said she understood exactly what choice was being made. And we dismantle everything. The criminal operations, the violence, everything Marco wanted gone. That's the plan. Cassian's hands were still on her shoulders. It'll take time, years maybe. But we do it right. Build something legitimate from the ashes. Why do I feel like I'm making a deal with the devil? Because you probably are. He almost smiled. But at least it's a devil you understand. Elena closed her eyes. Thought about the girl who'd walked into Pisano Global 6 weeks ago. Broke. Desperate. Clinging to a coffee cup in hope. That girl would never have considered this. Would have run screaming. But that girl was gone. Replaced by someone who'd broken into offices and gathered intelligence and stood in a warehouse surrounded by armed men negotiating with a killer. Someone who'd seen monsters and become something sharp enough to survive them. Okay? She opened her eyes. I'll stay. We do this together. Cassian exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath for 6 years and finally remembered how to let go. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm going to make your life hell. I'm counting on it. He pulled her closer, rested his forehead against hers. You're the only person who can. Then the warehouse doors exploded inward. Smoke. Gunfire. Men in tactical gear flooding the space with the precision of military operations. Not FBI, not police. Isabella's people. The remnants of Luca's network, coming for revenge. Cassian moved instantly, shoved Elena behind him, pulled a gun from inside his jacket with movement so smooth they looked practiced. Marco! His voice cut through chaos. Get Whitmore and her mother to the extraction point, now! Marco appeared from the shadows, grabbed Elena's arm. "This way! Move! My mother! I've got her!" Another guard was already pushing the wheelchair toward a back exit, moving fast despite the IV lines and oxygen equipment. Bullets tore through metal, shattered equipment. The medical monitors around her mother sparked and died. Elena ran, let Marco pull her toward the exit while gunfire erupted behind them. Heard Cassian's voice shouting orders in Italian. The crack of returning fire. Men screaming. They burst through a back door into an alley. SUVs waiting. Engine running. Marco shoved Elena into the back seat. Her mother was already there, oxygen mask askew, eyes wide with terror, but still breathing. "Go!" Marco slammed the door, slapped the roof. The SUV lurched forward, tires screaming against wet pavement. Elena looked back through the rear window, saw the warehouse, saw muzzle flashes through broken doors, saw Cassian's silhouette moving through smoke like death itself. "We have to go back. He's still in there." The driver didn't respond, just drove faster, turned corners hard enough to throw Elena against the door. "Where are we going?" "Safe house, Brooklyn, Mr. Moretti's orders." The driver's voice was flat, professional. "You stay there until this is handled." "How many people are in that warehouse?" "Enough to handle Isabella's people. They knew this was coming, been preparing for 3 days. Elena's stomach turned. He knew they'd attack.
Of course he knew. Isabella's people were always going to retaliate. The only question was when. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror. Mr. Moretti made sure it happened on his terms. Controlled environment, limited civilians, clean extraction for you and your mother. They'd been bait. Elena and her mother. Set up to draw Isabella's forces into an ambush.
Cassian had been planning this for days. Orchestrated everything. The kidnapping, the warehouse confrontation, Elena's choice to stay. All of it calculated to create exactly this moment. The SUV pulled up to a brownstone in Carroll Gardens. Armed guards flanked the door. The driver cut the engine. "Inside, don't come out until Mr. Moretti gives the all clear." Elena helped her mother into the building. A medical team was waiting. Professional. Efficient. They immediately started checking vitals, reconnecting equipment, stabilizing systems. "She's stable." The lead medic looked up. "Infections controlled. She'll be okay." Relief hit like a physical force. Elena's knees almost buckled. Then her phone buzzed. Text from Cassian. "Situation handled. 20 minutes. Stay put." Another text. This one from an unknown number with an image attached. Elena opened it. The photo showed Isabella Moretti. Not in FBI custody. Dead. Slumped against a wall with bullet holes in her chest and head. The text below read, "Problem solved. Meet me at the Navy Yard. We need to talk." Grace Elena's blood went cold. Grace, Cassian's operations director, the woman who'd shown her evidence of his guilt, who was supposed to be working for Isabella, who'd just sent a photo of Isabella's corpse with casual efficiency that suggested she'd been the one to pull the trigger. Nothing made sense. Every alliance was inverting, every truth becoming a lie. Elena's phone rang. "Cassian." She answered. "Grace just texted me. She killed Isabella." "I know." Cassian's voice was tight, strained. "Don't respond. Don't go anywhere. Grace isn't who you think she is." "Then who is she?" "Federal agent. Undercover. Has been for 6 years. She was investigating my father when Marco died, got embedded in the organization, stayed after I took over." His breathing was harsh. "She's the one who's been feeding FBI information, building their case, and now that Isabella's dead, she's trying to tie up loose ends. Meaning me, meaning both of us." Gunfire crackled in the background. "She knows you can testify about FBI corruption, about how they dropped your immunity, about evidence being manipulated. You're a threat to her operation." "Where are you?" "Still at the warehouse, pinned down. Isabella's people were just the first wave." More gunfire. "Grace brought federal agents, real ones. She's using them to clean up everyone who knows the truth." Elena's mind raced. "How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know this isn't another manipulation?" "You don't." Cassian's voice cracked. "You just have to decide who you trust more, me or a federal agent who spent 6 years lying to everyone." The line went dead. Elena stood in the brownstone, surrounded by armed guards and medical equipment, holding a phone with a photo of a dead woman and a text from someone who might be trying to kill her. Her mother was stable, safe. That was all that mattered. But Cassian was pinned down in a warehouse surrounded by federal agents and hired killers. And Grace, whoever she really was, knew where Elena was hiding. Every option led to violence. Every choice ended in blood. Elena looked at the guards. "I need a gun." The nearest one frowned. Mr. Moretti said, "I don't care what he said. Give me a weapon, now." The guard hesitated, then pulled a compact pistol from an ankle holster, handed it over. "You know how to use that?" "Point and shoot. I've seen enough movies." Elena checked the magazine. Full. Safety off. "How do I get back to the Navy Yard?" "You don't. It's a war zone." "Then I guess I'm going to war." She looked at her mother. "Keep her safe. Whatever happens. Keep her alive." The medic nodded. "We will." Elena walked out of the brownstone into rain and darkness, found an SUV with keys in the ignition. Guards tried to stop her. She pointed the gun at them. "Move or I shoot. Your choice." They moved. Elena got in the SUV, started the engine, drove toward the Navy Yard with a gun in her lap and the certainty that she was about to do something incredibly stupid. But Cassian had saved her mother, protected her, offered her a future when she had none. Maybe he'd been manipulating her. Maybe this was all another layer of lies. But he was alone in that warehouse, fighting for his life. And Elena wasn't the kind of person who left people behind. Not anymore. The Navy Yard appeared through rain like a ghost. Gunfire echoed across empty lots. Muzzle flashes lit windows. Sirens wailed in the distance. Elena parked 3 blocks away, walked the rest on foot. Gun held low, rain soaking through her clothes. She approached from the side, found a rusted door hanging open, slipped inside. The warehouse was chaos. Smoke, bodies, bullet holes in metal, the acrid smell of gunpowder and blood. Men in tactical gear were exchanging fire across catwalks, some wearing FBI vests, others in unmarked black. Impossible to tell who was working for who. Elena moved through shadows, staying low, looking for Cassian. Found him behind an overturned forklift, blood on his shoulder, gun in one hand, phone in the other. He saw her, went rigid with shock. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Saving your ass. You're welcome." Elena crouched beside him. "How bad is it?" "Shoulder, through and through. I'll live." He grabbed her arm. "You need to leave. Now. Grace has federal agents targeting anyone connected to the organization. You're on that list. Then we leave together." Elena looked around. "Where's the exit?" "Back the way you came. But there's at least 8 hostiles between here and there." "Then we fight through them." Cassian stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "You don't know how to fight." "I know how to shoot." She raised the pistol. "Point, pull trigger, hit target. I've been paying attention." Despite everything, Cassian almost laughed. "You're insane." "I'm practical. We either die here or we try. Those are the options." Elena checked the magazine again. "So what's it going to be?" Cassian looked at her. Really looked at her. The girl who'd destroyed his brother's inkwell 6 weeks ago, who'd stumbled through his world breaking things and somehow surviving, who was now crouched beside him in a war zone with a gun in her hands and determination in her eyes. Together. He stood, winced. "On 3. We move fast. Don't stop. Don't look back." "Got it. 1, 2. Gunfire erupted from above. The catwalk exploded. Metal rained down like shrapnel. Grace appeared through smoke. Gun raised, FBI vest, eyes cold as death. "Cassian Moretti, Elena Whitmore, you're both under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, and racketeering." Cassian raised his gun. "You're a federal agent, undercover for 6 years, building a case while people died." "Doing my job." Grace's voice was flat. "Bringing down a criminal empire. You just happen to be collateral damage." Isabella, Luca, Marco, all of them died while you gathered evidence. Cassian's finger tightened on the trigger. "You could have stopped it, could have saved them, but you needed the case more than you needed justice. I needed prosecutions that would stick. That required evidence, time." Grace's expression didn't change.
And now I have both. Surrender. This doesn't have to end badly. It already ended badly. Cassian's voice went cold. 6 years ago, when my brother died and you did nothing. He fired. Grace moved. The bullet sparked off metal beside her head. She returned fire. 3 shots. Fast. Precise. Cassian dove left, Elena right. Bullets tore through the space they'd occupied.
Elena hit the ground hard, rolled, came up with her gun raised, fired twice in Grace's direction. Both shots went wide, hit nothing, but they made Grace dive for cover. Cassian was moving, circling, blood trailing from his shoulder. He motioned to Elena, pointed toward a side exit, mouthed the word, "Go." Elena shook her head, not leaving him. More gunfire from above. Federal agents on the catwalks, trying to pin them down. This was it. The end. No way out except through a wall of bullets. Elena looked at Cassian, found him already looking at her, and in his eyes she saw something she'd never seen before. Fear. Not for himself. For her. He loved her. Somewhere between manipulation and survival and 6 weeks of controlled chaos, he'd actually fallen for her. And she'd fallen too, despite everything, despite the lies and violence and impossible choices. They were both broken, both damaged, both too far gone to pretend otherwise. But they were broken together. Elena made her choice. She stood, fired 3 shots at the catwalk, gave Cassian covering fire while he moved toward the exit. Bullets answered. Too many, too close. One caught her in the side. Pain exploded. She went down. Cassian screamed, raw, anguished, charged back toward her through gunfire like he didn't care if he died as long as he reached her first. He grabbed her, pulled her behind cover, pressed his hand against the wound in her side. Blood poured through his fingers. Stay with me. His voice was breaking. Elena, stay with me. She tried to speak, couldn't. Everything hurt, everything was red. Above them, Grace was shouting orders. Federal agents advancing, closing in. No way out. No miracle rescue. Just 2 people bleeding out in a warehouse surrounded by everything they'd destroyed and built and lost. Cassian bent over her, pressed his forehead to hers. I'm sorry. For all of it. For using you. For dragging you into this. For Shut up! Elena's voice came out wet. We're not dying here. Yes, we are. No. She grabbed his collar, pulled him close. We survive. Together. Like you said. Partners. Partners. Cassian's hand tightened on her wound. I love you. I need you to know that. Whatever happens. It was real. Elena kissed him, tasted blood and rain and gunpowder and something deeper. Something that felt like the truth for the first time in 6 weeks. When they broke apart, sirens were wailing outside, red and blue lights flashing through broken walls. Police, real police, flooding the Navy Yard. Grace's voice cut through chaos. Federal agents, stand down! Suspects are in custody! But the police didn't stand down. They moved in fast. Professional. Surrounded the warehouse. Through the smoke and blood and fading consciousness, Elena heard a voice she recognized. Agent Webb, FBI. Special Agent Grace Morrison, you're under arrest for corruption, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Drop your weapon. Grace's face went white. What? We've been investigating you for 6 months, suspected you were manipulating evidence, building false cases, using your position to eliminate witnesses. Webb appeared through smoke, gun drawn. Isabella Moretti's murder was the final piece. You executed her to cover up your own crimes. It's over. Grace's gun lowered. Just slightly. Enough. Cassian fired. The bullet took her in the chest. Clean. Final. She dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Elena's vision was tunneling, black creeping in from the edges. She felt Cassian's arms around her, heard him shouting for medics. The last thing she saw before everything went dark was his face, blood-streaked, terrified, human, looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Then nothing, just black, and the distant sound of sirens singing the city to sleep. Elena woke to the smell of disinfectant and the steady beep of hospital monitors. Her side felt like someone had shoved hot iron through her ribs and left it there. Every breath hurt. Every movement sent lightning up her spine. But she was breathing. That counted for something. She opened her eyes.
White ceiling, fluorescent lights. The generic anonymity of a hospital room that could be anywhere. "You're awake."
The voice came from beside the bed. Elena turned her head slowly, found Cassian sitting in a chair that looked too small for him, wearing a hospital gown under a borrowed jacket, his left shoulder bandaged thick enough to suggest surgery. His face was gray with exhaustion, unshaven, eyes bloodshot from what looked like days without sleep. But he was alive. "How long?" Her voice came out like gravel. 3 days. You coded twice on the operating table. Lost enough blood that they weren't sure you'd make it." He leaned forward. His hand found hers on the bed, squeezed gently. "But you're stubborn. I'm learning that about you." Elena tried to laugh. It came out as a wheeze. "Where are we?" "Mount Sinai. Different floor from your mother. FBI has guards posted outside, but we're not in custody." Cassian's jaw tightened. Webb's investigation into Grace opened up everything: corruption charges, evidence tampering, conspiracy. The entire case against me collapsed when they realized a federal agent had been manufacturing evidence for 6 years. "Grace is dead." "Yes." No emotion in his voice. Statement of fact. "I killed her, self-defense. Witnesses confirmed it. Webb confirmed it. It's over." Elena's brain was moving slowly through fog. "Isabella? Also dead." Grace executed her to cover up her own crimes. Made it look like gang violence. Cassian's grip on her hand tightened. Turns out Grace had been running her own operation inside the FBI, using her position to manipulate cases, eliminate witnesses, build prosecutions that served her career instead of justice. Isabella, Luca, even Marco. All of them died while she gathered evidence and did nothing. "She let your brother die. She facilitated it." Cassian's voice went flat. "Grace was embedded in my father's organization when Marco went to prosecutors. She knew Luca and Isabella were planning the hit, could have stopped it. But she let it happen because Marco's death meant the case stayed open. Meant she could keep investigating, keep building her reputation." Elena's stomach turned. "That's not law enforcement. That's murder. That's ambition without conscience. Same thing that drives most people in positions of power." He looked down at their hands. Webb's team found communications going back 7 years. Grace coordinating with criminals, allowing violence, manipulating evidence to protect her sources while people died. She was worse than anyone she was investigating. What happens now? Federal investigation into FBI corruption. Congressional hearings. Media firestorm. Cassian met her eyes. "And you and I walk away clean. Victims of a rogue agent's conspiracy. That's the official narrative. Is it true?" "Parts of it." He almost smiled. "The parts that matter, anyway." Elena wanted to ask more. Wanted to know exactly how much of the last 6 weeks had been real versus manufactured. But exhaustion was pulling her under again. Her eyes drifted closed. "Your mother's stable." Cassian's voice followed her into darkness. "Treatment's continuing. She's going to make it." Elena let those words carry her back to sleep. Kiss. The next time she woke, sunlight was streaming through windows and her mother was sitting beside the bed. Margaret Whitmore looked better. Color in her face, eyes clearer, still fragile but no longer dying. "Hey, baby." She squeezed Elena's hand. "You scared the hell out of me." "Sorry." Elena's throat was dry. "Occupational hazard, apparently. Working for crime bosses will do that." Her mother's voice held no judgment, just exhausted acceptance. "The nurses told me what happened. The warehouse, the shooting, federal agents." "Mom, I'm not angry. I'm terrified, but not angry." Margaret leaned closer. "You saved my life. Got me treatment I couldn't afford. Risked everything to make sure I survived. I can't be angry about that, even if the cost was almost losing you." "I'm okay." "You're not okay. You got shot. You almost died. You're going to have nightmares about this for years." Her mother's eyes were wet. "But you're alive, and that's what matters." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to tell her mother it was fine, everything would be fine. But she'd spent 6 weeks learning that fine was a lie people told themselves to sleep at night. "I'm sorry I brought this into your life." "You didn't bring it. You survived it." Margaret's grip tightened. "Your father would be proud. He always said you were tougher than you looked. Guess he was right." The mention of her father landed like a stone. Elena hadn't thought about him in weeks. the investigative journalist who died chasing a story about organized crime when she was 12. She'd spent 14 years thinking it was just bad luck and dangerous work. Now she wondered if it was something else. Someone silencing him before he exposed the truth. Did Dad know about the Moretti family? Her mother went very still. Why would you ask that? Because he died investigating trafficking networks. And the Morettis ran trafficking operations for decades. The timing's too close to be coincidence. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. He was building a case, had sources inside the organization. He told me it would be the story that changed everything, expose corruption at the highest levels, put dangerous people in prison. Her voice cracked. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Single car accident. Brake failure. The same way Marco died. The same method Luca had used for years. Elena's chest tightened. Luca killed Dad. I suspected. Could never prove it. But yes, I think your father got too close to the truth, and they eliminated him. Her mother wiped her eyes. I tried to warn you. Tried to tell you working for that company was dangerous. But you needed the money, needed to save me. I couldn't stop you, even though I knew where it might lead. You knew Pisano Global was connected to organized crime? I knew the name Moretti, knew what they represented, but I also knew you were desperate and I was dying. I gambled that you'd be invisible enough to survive, that they wouldn't notice one more assistant. Margaret's expression broke. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Elena wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at the secrets and lies and 14 years of not knowing the truth. But she understood, because she'd made the same choice. Risked everything to save the person she loved. Became complicit in violence and corruption because survival required it. They were the same. Mother and daughter. Both willing to cross lines they couldn't uncross if it meant keeping each other alive. It's not your fault. It is, but we both live with it. Her mother stood slowly. There's someone outside who wants to see you. I'll give you privacy. Who? But Margaret was already walking toward the door. She paused at the threshold. He's been here every day, sleeping in that chair, refusing to leave. Whatever you think about him, about what he's done, that part's real. I can see it. Then she was gone. 30 seconds later, Cassian walked in. He looked worse than before. Shoulders still bandaged, dark circles under his eyes, moving like every step hurt. He sat in the chair beside her bed without speaking. Elena broke the silence. You knew about my father? Yes. No hesitation, no attempt to lie. I found the connection 3 days after you started working. Investigative journalist. Died under suspicious circumstances 14 years ago. Luca's work. Same methodology he used on Marco. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were already carrying enough weight. Adding your father's murder would have broken you. Cassian leaned back, exhaustion written across every line of his face. And because I'm a coward, I knew if you found out you'd hate me, hate the organization, walk away before I could fix any of it. You should have told me anyway. I know. He looked at her. I'm not good at doing the right thing. I'm good at survival, at control, at making impossible choices and living with the consequences. But being honest, being vulnerable, I'm terrible at that. You're going to have to learn. Elena's voice was rough. Because if we're doing this, if we're actually building something together, no more secrets, no more manipulation. We're partners, or we're nothing. Cassian studied her for a long moment. You still want to stay, after everything. I don't know what I want. Elena shifted in the bed. Pain shot through her side. I want my mother to live. I want to not get shot again. I want to sleep without nightmares. But none of that's happening anytime soon. She met his eyes. So I might as well stick with the devil I know. That's practical. You hired me for being practical. She almost smiled. Might as well get your money's worth. Cassian reached out, touched her face gently. I meant what I said in the warehouse. I love you. It wasn't manipulation, wasn't strategy. It was real. I know. Elena leaned into his hand. I love you too, which is probably the dumbest thing I've ever admitted. Why? Because you're a killer, a criminal, a man who spent 6 years building an empire on violence and control, Loving you makes me complicit in all of it.
Yes, it does.
No apology, just truth. But it also makes you the one person who can help me become something different, something better. What Marco wanted. That's a lot of pressure. You can handle it. You've handled everything else. He pulled his hand back. I'm liquidating the criminal operations, all of it. Weapons, trafficking, money laundering, everything that made the family what it was. Elena stared at him. That's your entire empire. It's my father's empire, built on blood and fear and everything Marco died trying to escape. Cassian's jaw tightened. I'm done protecting it. Done pretending it's anything except poison. We dismantle it piece by piece and build something legitimate. That'll take years. I have years. His eyes held hers. Question is whether you're willing to spend them with me. Elena thought about the girl who'd walked into Pisano Global 6 weeks ago. Desperate, broke, clinging to hope. That girl would have run screaming, but that girl was gone, replaced by someone who'd survived violence and betrayal in federal investigations. Someone who'd looked at monsters and become sharp enough to stand beside them. Someone who'd fallen in love with a killer and decided that maybe, just maybe, even killers could become something better, if they had the right person helping them. Yeah, Elena's voice steadied. I'm willing.
Good. Cassian stood, winced. Then we start when you're healed. No rush, no pressure. We do this right. What happens in the meantime? You recover. Your mother gets treatment. I handle federal investigations and media attention. He moved toward the door. And we figure out how to be normal people for a while, or as normal as we're capable of being. I don't think normal's possible anymore. Probably not, but we can try. He glanced back. Get some rest. I'll be here when you wake up. You don't have to. I know. I'm doing it anyway. Something in his expression softened. You're the only good thing that's happened to me in 6 years. I'm not letting you out of my sight until I'm sure you're okay. Then he left. Elena lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, processing everything that had happened. The violence, the betrayal, the impossible choices. Her father murdered by Luca. Her mother saved by blood money. Herself transformed from invisible barista into federal witness into something else entirely. A partner to a reformed crime boss trying to honor his dead brother's memory. It was insane. All of it. But it was also real. More real than anything Elena had experienced in her entire 26 years. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her again. Woke. 3 weeks later, Elena was discharged from Mount Sinai. Her mother had been moved to a private recovery facility in Connecticut. State-of-the-art treatment, full-time medical staff, everything money could buy. The infection was gone. The tumors were shrinking. Prognosis was good for the first time in 2 years. Cassian had arranged all of it, paid for everything, made sure Margaret Whitmore had the best possible chance at survival. Because that's what partners did. They protected the people who mattered. Elena stood outside the hospital in borrowed clothes and afternoon sunlight, breathing air that didn't smell like disinfectant for the first time in weeks. A car pulled up. Black sedan, tinted windows. Marco driving. He got out, opened the back door. Miss Whitmore, Mr. Moretti's waiting. Elena got in. Elena. Cassian sat in the back seat, laptop open, reviewing documents. He looked up when she entered, closed the computer. How do you feel? Like I got shot 3 weeks ago. Elena settled into the leather seat. But alive. That counts. It does. He handed her a folder. This is everything. Financial records showing the liquidation of criminal operations. Documentation of cooperation with federal investigators. Contracts for the new business structure. Elena opened the folder. Scanned pages of legal language and corporate restructuring. Whitmore and Moretti Strategic Consulting. Specializing in cultural asset protection and international risk analysis. Your art history expertise becomes the foundation. My business infrastructure provides the platform. Cassian's expression was unreadable. Legitimate, legal, everything Marco wanted. You put my name first. You earned it. He pulled out another document. This is a scholarship foundation. Arts education for students who don't fit traditional academic systems. Named after your father and my brother. Funded by liquidated assets from the criminal operations.
Elena stared at the papers, at her father's name printed beside Marco's, at proof that blood money could become something meaningful. How much? 50 million to start. More as we close remaining operations. Cashin's voice was quiet. It won't bring them back. Won't undo the violence, but it's something. A legacy that matters. Elena's throat was tight. Thank you. Don't thank me. This is what we're building together. What comes next? He looked out the window at Manhattan sliding past. The empire's gone. The criminal network's dismantled. Everyone connected to Luca and Isabella is either in federal custody or disappeared. It's over. Just like that. Just like that. He glanced at her. We survived. That's more than most people in this world get. The car pulled up to a brownstone in Brooklyn. Park Slope, tree-lined street, normal neighborhood. Marco's apartment, the one Cassian had kept for 6 years after his brother died. I want to show you something. Cassian got out, held the door for Elena. They went inside. The apartment looked different, cleaned, updated. The photographs were still on the walls, but new furniture filled the spaces. New life breathing into old memories. I'm moving out of the corporate apartment. Cassian walked to the windows. Too many ghosts. Too much violence attached to that space. I need somewhere that feels like starting over. Here? Here. Where Marco lived. Where he believed we could be better. He turned. I'm asking if you want to share it. Not as employee and employer. As partners building something real. Elena looked around. At the photographs of two brothers who'd loved each other despite everything. At the space that had held grief and was now offering possibility. I barely know how to live with another person. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. Cassian moved closer. No pressure, no expectation. Just two people who survived hell trying to build something that doesn't hurt. Elena thought about it. About waking up in this space instead of her cramped studio. About building a life with someone who understood exactly how broken she was because he was just as broken. It should have felt wrong, should have felt like surrender. Instead, it felt like the first honest choice she'd made in 6 weeks. Okay? She met his eyes. Let's try. Cassian's expression shifted. Relief. Hope. Something almost like joy. Yeah? Yeah. Elena stepped closer. But we're redecorating. Those photographs are nice, but this place needs something that's ours, not just Marco's memory. Whatever you want. He pulled her close, carefully, mindful of her healing wound. We build it together, all of it. They stood in the apartment while afternoon light painted the walls gold and the city hummed outside, and something fragile and new took shape between them. It wasn't redemption, wasn't forgiveness for the violence and lies and impossible choices, but it was real. Human. Two people who'd seen the worst of each other and decided that maybe the worst wasn't all there was. Maybe, buried under blood and betrayal, was the possibility of something better. That's 6 months later, Whitmore and Moretti Strategic Consulting opened its first office in Lower Manhattan. The space was beautiful, modern, glass and steel with art installations Elena had curated personally. Renaissance pieces next to contemporary work. History and future existing in the same frame. The launch event was crowded. Clients, investors, art collectors interested in the protection services they offered. Federal investigators who'd become allies during the transition. Media covering the story of a reformed crime family building something legitimate. Elena stood near the windows, wearing a dress that cost more than her first car, watching Cassian work the room with the same cold precision he'd brought to criminal operations. But now it was serving something legal, something meaningful. Her mother sat nearby, healthy enough to attend, talking to scholarship recipients about art history and second chances. Margaret Whitmore had beaten cancer, outlived prognosis, survived long enough to see her daughter transform survival into purpose. You did it. Marco appeared beside Elena, holding champagne. He'd stayed on as head of operations, helped transition the legitimate business, remained loyal even when loyalty meant abandoning everything he'd known. 6 months ago, we were running criminal networks. Now we're consulting on cultural asset protection for museums. It's weird. It's better, Marco smiled. Marco would be proud of both of you. Elena looked across the room, found Cassian watching her. He excused himself from a conversation and walked over. How are you holding up? He touched her back gently, protective gesture he'd developed over months of learning how to be human instead of terrifying. Good. Overwhelmed, but good. Elena leaned into him. Is this real? Did we actually pull this off? We did. Cassian's voice held something close to wonder. Legitimate business, federal clearance, contracts with actual museums instead of smuggling networks. He paused. It's not exciting, not dangerous. Is that okay? It's perfect. Elena turned to face him. I've had enough excitement to last a lifetime. Boring sounds amazing. Good, because I'm planning on very boring for the foreseeable future. He pulled out a small box, set it on the window ledge between them. Except for one thing. Elena stared at the box, at the velvet that suggested exactly what was inside. Cassian. I'm not asking yet, just showing you it exists. He didn't open it, just left it there. When you're ready. When we've built enough trust that this feels right instead of terrifying. But I want you to know I'm serious about this, about us, about building a life together. Elena's throat tightened. 6 months ago, she'd been a broke barista with a dying mother and no options. Now she was standing in her own office, wearing designer clothes, looking at an engagement ring from a reformed crime boss who loved her enough to wait until she was ready. It was insane. All of it. But it was also exactly what she wanted. Ask me in a year. Her voice came out rough. When we've proven we can do boring without killing each other. When we're sure this is real and not just trauma bonding. A year. I can do a year. Cassian picked up the box, put it back in his pocket. But fair warning, I'm very patient when I want something. I've noticed. Elena kissed him. Brief, gentle. The kind of kiss that promised more later when they were alone. Thank you for all of this. For keeping your promise to Marco. For building something that matters. Thank you for making me want to. Cassian's hand found hers. I would have kept being a monster if you hadn't shown me there was another option. You were never a monster, just someone who'd forgotten how to be anything else. Same thing. No. Monsters can't change. You changed. That makes you human. Elena squeezed his hand. Deeply flawed, occasionally terrifying, but human. Across the room, someone clinked a glass. Speeches were starting. Elena and Cassian were expected to address the crowd. Talk about vision and mission and building bridges between cultural preservation and modern security. Normal business owner stuff. Boring. Safe. Exactly what they'd fought for. They walked to the center of the room together. Partners in every sense of the word. Cassian spoke first. Thanked investors and clients and the team who'd made the transition possible. His voice was controlled, professional, but Elena could hear the emotion underneath. The relief of finally becoming what his brother had died believing he could be. Then Elena spoke. Talked about art history and pattern recognition and how the skills that made her good at decoding Renaissance trade symbols translated perfectly to protecting cultural assets in modern global markets. She didn't mention the violence, the shooting, the federal investigations. That was the past. This was the future. When the speeches ended, the crowd applauded, music started, people mingled. Elena and Cassian slipped away to a quiet corner. Just the two of them and the city lights stretching below like possibilities. We did it. Elena's voice was quiet. We actually survived and came out the other side. We did. Cassian pulled her close. And we keep doing it. Every day. Building something real instead of just destroying each other. Is it always going to be this hard? Probably. We're both damaged, both carrying trauma. That doesn't just disappear. He looked down at her. But we're damaged together. That counts for something. It counts for everything. Elena rested her head against his chest, listened to his heartbeat. Steady, human, alive. They stayed like that while the party continued around them, and the future unfolded in directions neither of them could predict. 6 months ago, Elena Whitmore had been invisible, desperate, clinging to survival with bloody fingernails. Now she was building an empire, a legitimate one, with a partner who understood exactly what it cost to become something better than the worst version of yourself. It wasn't a fairy tale, wasn't redemption in any traditional sense, but it was real. Human. Two broken people choosing each other despite everything. And sometimes that was enough. 1 year later, on the anniversary of the warehouse shooting, Cassian proposed. Not in the office, not during some grand event, just the two of them in Marco's apartment. Their apartment now, with takeout containers and red wine and the comfortable silence of people who'd learned how to exist together. He pulled out the box. Same one from the launch party. Opened it to reveal a ring that was beautiful and understated and absolutely perfect.
Elena Whitmore, you destroyed my brother's inkwell within 5 minutes of meeting me. You survived federal investigations, warehouse shootouts, and 6 months of learning how to run a legitimate business. You've made me want to be better every single day. He took her hand. Will you marry me? Elena looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the life they'd built from ashes and blood and impossible choices. A year ago, she would have said no, would have run, would have protected herself from the risk of loving someone this damaged. But she'd spent a year learning that damage wasn't the same as broken, that people could carry trauma and still build something beautiful, that love didn't fix anything, but it made survival feel less lonely. Yes. The word came out steady. Sure. Yes, I'll marry you. Cassian slid the ring onto her finger, kissed her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, and for those few seconds she was. When they broke apart, both smiling, both crying a little, Elena looked at the photographs on the wall. Marco and Cassian as children, her father's picture that she'd added months ago, both men who'd believed in something better and died before seeing it. They'd be proud of us. Her voice was thick. I hope so. Cassian followed her gaze. I spent 6 years trying to honor Marco's memory. Took me that long to realize the best way to honor him was to actually become what he believed I could be. You did it. We did it, he corrected. I couldn't have done this alone. You made it possible. Elena leaned against him, felt his arms wrap around her, solid, real, home. Outside the windows, Brooklyn hummed with normal life. People going to normal jobs, facing normal problems, building normal futures. Elena and Cassian would never be completely normal, would always carry the weight of what they'd survived, the violence, the betrayal, the impossible choices. But they were building something real, something that mattered, something that honored the people who died believing in better. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 2 years later, Whitmore and Moretti Strategic Consulting had offices in 5 countries and a client list that included major museums, private collectors, and cultural institutions worldwide. The Scholarship Foundation had helped 300 students pursue arts education, kids who didn't fit traditional systems. Kids like Elena had been. Now they had opportunities she'd never dreamed of. Margaret Whitmore remained in remission, healthy, active, volunteering with the scholarship program and telling anyone who'd listen about her daughter, the successful business owner. The federal investigations into FBI corruption had resulted in 17 convictions. Grace Morrison's legacy was destroyed, her crimes exposed. Justice, incomplete and messy, but real. And Elena and Cassian got married in a small ceremony in the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. Just family, close friends. Marco and the team, Margaret crying happy tears. No media, no spectacle. Just 2 people who'd survived hell promising to build a future together. The reception was held in their apartment. Music, laughter, dancing. At one point, Elena found herself alone on the balcony, looking out at the city that had nearly killed her and somehow became home. Cassian joined her, pulled her close. What are you thinking about? How different everything is. How 2 years ago I was serving coffee and drowning in medical debt. How I walked into your office thinking I'd last maybe a week. Elena turned to face him. I never imagined this. Any of this. Neither did I. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life running criminal operations and pretending I didn't hate what I'd become. Cassian's hand found hers, wedding ring glinting in city lights. Then you destroyed that inkwell and everything changed. Best 5 minutes of my life. Mine too. He kissed her forehead. You ready for what comes next? What comes next? Building this, expanding the business, growing the foundation, maybe eventually having kids who don't grow up in the world we came from.
Cassian's voice was soft. Building a legacy that Marco and your father would be proud of. Elena thought about it. About children growing up surrounded by art and education instead of violence. About teaching them that mistakes didn't define you, that broken people could become something better. About building a future that honored the past without repeating it. Yeah, she squeezed his hand. I'm ready. They stood on the balcony while the party continued inside and the city sprawled below and the future stretched ahead in directions neither of them could fully see. It wouldn't be easy, would never be completely safe. They'd both carry trauma. Both have nightmares. Both struggle with the weight of what they'd survived. But they'd survived together. Built something real from ashes. Transformed blood money into scholarships and legitimate business and a life that mattered. That was the victory. Not perfection, not redemption, just two people choosing each other every day and building something better than the worst versions of themselves. Elena Whitmore had walked into Cassian Moretti's office 2 years ago as a desperate barista with an art history degree and no options. She'd walked out as a partner, a wife, a business owner building cultural bridges across continents. More than that, she'd walked out human, real, capable of loving someone deeply flawed because she was just as flawed, and that somehow made it work. The clumsy girl who destroyed a priceless inkwell had become the woman who helped rebuild a man's shattered soul. And Cassian Moretti, the ruthless Sicilian enforcer who'd ruled New York's criminal underworld with ice and violence, had become someone capable of love and vulnerability and building something that didn't require blood to survive. They weren't redeemed, weren't forgiven for the choices they'd made, but they were real. They were together. They were building a future that honored the people who'd believed in better, even when better seemed impossible. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for. Not a fairy tale. Not a perfect ending. Just two broken people becoming something more than the sum of their damage. Together, always together. The music from inside drifted through open doors, laughter, celebration, life continuing despite everything. Elena pulled Cassian back toward the party, toward their friends, toward the future they'd fought for and nearly died building. As they crossed the threshold, hand in hand, Elena looked back one last time at the city lights. Manhattan glittered like broken glass. Beautiful and deadly, and absolutely indifferent to human suffering. But Elena Whitmore was no longer invisible, no longer desperate, no longer the girl who'd survived on hope and coffee. She was someone who'd looked at monsters and become strong enough to stand beside them, who'd fallen in love with darkness and found light hiding underneath, who'd taken blood money and transformed it into something that mattered. The city didn't care, would never care. But Elena did. Cassian did. And together they were building something that would outlast the violence and the grief and the impossible choices. Something human, something real, something worth surviving for. And that, finally, was enough.